Good morning. It is 41 degrees. We've got no rain out there. We're going to have rain later. 41 degrees and overcast here along the Sound Shore. Welcome to Mornings with Bob Marrone. This is your radio station at the train station, Radio Westchester. It is March 25th, 2020. Who knew we'd all be around this long? Alrighty, let's get to some of the headlines today. Congress nears a deal on nearly $2 trillion. We'll get into some of the deals and the details for you. This happened overnight. President Trump would like to see things started easing or to ease by April 12th, Easter Sunday. Here in New York, that certainly won't be the case, and Governor Cuomo is very concerned that there will not be enough beds or respirators as the numbers of the virus in New York continue to grow dangerously geometrically. The entire nation of India is locked down, the largest in the world. And by the way, here in New York State, they're saying that the apex of the outbreak is 2 to 3 weeks away. And here in Westchester, one daycare center is still open, but daycare centers are being financially hit and probably face being closed across the state before this is over. And for sports fans, gee, there's even bad news there. You won't believe this if you're oh yes you will if you're a Met fan. Noah Syndergaard, he has to go in for Tommy John surgery. He'll be gone for this coming season and maybe some of the next. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone. Stay right there. Weather coming up. As always, the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses, and it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. As we told you earlier, it is overcast, 41 degrees, mostly cloudy today, with a few light showers or sprinkles, the temperature leveling off at about 45. So a very narrow range, as we used to say on Wall Street, narrow spread. And tonight, partly cloudy, 37. You'll need your blanket. And Thursday, mostly sunny skies, a temperature of 55. The wind out of the north, 5 to 15 miles an hour. And as we get into Friday, it's like every other day. Friday morning showers giving way to increased sunshine. The high will be 58 degrees. The overnight low will be 40. And the bottom of the 6 o'clock hour will be brought to you by PluginVirtualReality.com, Dominic's Fine Cigars, the law firm of Pena & Con, Aging Issues Management, and their partners, Aging Issues Radio. And as always, don't forget the Beachmont Tavern. Welcome once again. We have a lot of news to get through today, but most importantly, welcome. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station, broadcasting live on Radio Jar, YouTube, Periscope, Instagram. I know we're having some YouTube problems. We're still working with them. Periscope, so many different outlets. I can't remember half of them. But we are on to MyTuner Radio, RadioWestchester.com, Mornings with Bob Marrone, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Let's get down to business. The number one story, really, since it affects all of us. Congressional and White House officials last night in the middle of the night were closing out final details of an unprecedented legislation to put through sweeping aid to businesses and workers, a total of $2 trillion, to respond to what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell called the most serious threat to Americans' health in over a century. Now, Donald Trump, the president, has said he'd like to see people start going back to work and getting things eased by April 12th. That still remains to be seen. In New York State, and we'll get to some of that, that will not be very likely, and we'll get into the reasons why. But let's just stay with this record-breaking deal. Excuse me. What they're talking about now is a nearly $400 billion program for small businesses to keep making payroll while workers are forced to stay home. And the $500 billion for business. One of the things the Democrats wanted for big business was oversight of that, but those subsidized loans will definitely go through. A one-time payment of $1,200 per person or $3,000 for a family of four. And again, there are a lot of little details into who gets the $1,200, who gets the $3,000, etc. That would go directly to the public. Again, a one-time payment of between $1,200 and $3,000 for a family. That's $1,200 per person. Would go directly to individuals and families. A huge cash infusion for hospitals expecting a flood of COVID-19 patients grew during the talks at the insistence of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, while Republicans pressed for tens of billions of dollars for additional relief delivered through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They have come to a consensus. The president likes the deal, and that's important. He has to sign it. Now, it may take a day or two to get done because after the Senate dots the I's and crosses the T's, if you will, it does have to go to the Congress, which is almost certain to approve it. And just by comparison, it is the largest package ever if you compare it to the $300 billion that was, it's more than $300 billion that was set aside for Hurricane Katrina. So that's how much we know. Now, as far as New York City goes, that is an issue altogether different. Governor Andrew Cuomo pleaded with federal government yesterday to deploy its reserves of ventilators and medical gear to New York, warning that coronavirus cases are spiking more aggressively than even the state had anticipated. Speaking at his daily COVID-19 briefing in Manhattan, which now has become nationally broadcast because of the way the governor is thought to be handling the crisis, he said the state's projection models now suggest the apex of the virus could hit New York within 14 to 21 days, rather than the original 45 days that had been forecast. He likened it to a bullet train heading for New York. And one of the things he said yesterday that really got the attention, he said a month ago, there were 50,000 people here in the States with the virus. Now there are 50,000. And he's obviously very concerned. Let's take a look here in New Rochelle, and then we'll get back, or Westchester, we'll get back to some of the state and national issues, but daycare is becoming a huge issue. Oak Lane Child Care Center in Chappaqua is one of those that is still open, and they're running out of money. But the larger issue is, I know in New York City, they're considering closing all daycare centers, and that's likely to come here because there's almost no way to run a daycare center and not have the people in close proximity. So that's still up in the air. So they're running out of money. Those are the ones that are open, but it's not so likely that they will be able to hang on much longer. Now we have some other items, but more importantly, let's get to New Rochelle, and again, those other items on a state and national and even international level as we pass through 641. The village of Buchanan was the last. That's up by the Indian Point, is the last municipality in Westchester without at least one confirmed case. County Executive George Latimer updated the numbers yesterday. But again, they change overnight, folks. These numbers are not statistics. He said we're checking the NBA standings, or like checking the NBA standings, because this number keeps moving. And here are the numbers of, we're going to give you the top 10 or so, and mostly south of 287. The number one, of course, still here in Westchester is New Rochelle with 235. Yonkers has 191 cases. In Mount Vernon, 81. White Plains, 61. 65 in White Plains. Greenburgh, 61. Port Chester, 45. Scarsdale, 38. And Eastchester, 35. We thank our friends at LOHUD. Again, we got the feed too, but we're quoting from their story and wish to give Mark Langriello and the paper that attribution. And so if you go on their website and you go to that piece, you will find some of the other towns. But those are the big ones. Now, again, going back to the governor's concerns, okay, talking about how the numbers are going up, the Federal Agency Management Association has provided just 400 ventilators to New York by Tuesday morning, despite repeated requests for 30,000. And he was irate, and some of the quotes you probably heard on the radio or TV yesterday were, quote, "You want a pat on the back for sending 400? He was furious. You picked the 26,000 people who are going to die, he said, so incensed he misstated the 29,000 New Yorkers who would be left out in the cold. Just hours after blistering Trump and FEMA, the feds promised to provide Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio with another 4,000. And, well, so that's how it rolls. Again, what the governor is saying is that within the next 2 to 3 weeks, this number is going to rise, and he estimates we'll need 50,000 more beds, 50,000 beds in total for emergent care. That is ICU beds. One of the pieces in the paper today that you'll find interesting in the New York Times, they say Governor Cuomo woke before dawn on Tuesday and found himself being a key Democratic voice, and saying that his press conferences now are being aired across the country in many locales. Again, attributing it to how well people believe that he is handling the crisis. Now, people leaving New York City amid the pandemic have told, have been told to self-quarantine for 14 days wherever they go. Now, yesterday we reported that it was just Florida that wanted it. Now they're saying if you leave New York City or this region here and go out to the island, you should do it. If you go to Pennsylvania, you should do it. You go to Jersey, you should do it. We can't go anywhere, can we? We have a scarlet letter on our sleeves. More than 60% of all new cases in the United States are in the New York metro area, which includes Long Island and Westchester. To everyone who has left in New York over the last few days because of the rate of the number of cases, you may have been exposed before you left. And once again, they're talking about another 14 to 21 days before the virus peaks here, and they are saying that it will be significant. Now, a couple of other items regarding this. It seems that the virus is living much longer on surfaces than we thought. The deadly coronavirus stays there for longer than previously thought, with traces found in cabins on the stricken Diamond Princess cruise ship 17 days, although it seems that these cruise ships are floating petri dishes. The coronavirus was identified on a variety of surfaces, said one piece, in cabins of both symptomatic and asymptomatic affected people. So this, again, is another one of those known unknowns, if you will. Is it 9 days? Is it 17 days? Obviously, it depends on the surface. It probably depends on how much moisture's in the air, probably, and I say probably, on the type of surface, the temperature, and so forth. Meanwhile, the number of coronavirus-infected NYPD members has surged to more than 200, with nearly 3,000 more out sick, according to Police Commissioner Dermot Shea. And he said 177 uniformed members of the force have been confirmed to have COVID, along with 34. Now, some union members and others are complaining that the force, that is the management of the police force, is not informing some of the other police officers, for example, if their partner should get it. Again, that remains to be confirmed, but that is what they're saying. Now, we mentioned earlier in the headlines, in India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced a 21-day nationwide lockdown. Check out the number, 1.3 billion people. 1.3 billion lockdown in India. Meanwhile, in New York City and elsewhere, in New York, and there's the city now, 52 inmates have tested positive for the coronavirus, and that number soared 34% in one day. And what we're seeing, folks, as you go through this, is we're seeing things begin to grow geometrically, the number of cases, particularly here in New York, and that's why the governor is saying, and he hasn't criticized the president's intent or hopefulness to start opening up the economy by Easter. But the point is, it's not going to happen here in New York. Also, Mayor de Blasio in New York City warned Tuesday the city agencies will be asked to find at least $1.3 billion in cuts as the pandemic has slashed tax revenue. So we shall see how that goes for those of you in the Bronx and others who are listening to this broadcast. Another problem that is emerging, doctors are hoarding medications touted as possible coronavirus treatments by writing prescriptions for themselves and family members, according to pharmacy boards in states across the country. This in the New York Times today. We like to look at our doctors as heroes and the nurses as heroes, and yes, they are. However, like everyone else, they have to concern themselves with their family, and perhaps we can even say have a selfish streak. The stockpiling has become so worrisome in Idaho, Kentucky, Ohio, Nevada, Oklahoma, and some other states that they've issued emergency restrictions on guidelines on how they may be dispensed. The medications being prescribed differ slightly from state to state, but those include lauded by President Trump at televised briefings as potential breakthrough treatments for the virus. Speaking of, those are just some. But speaking of, and I just had that story here. Yes, here it is. The death of an Arizona man, as you know, who drank aquarium cleaner in a misguided bid to stave off the virus has prompted a flurry of warnings amid panic over the pandemic. The deadly armchair Dr. RX involved chloroquine phosphate, an algae-killing substance that is not the same as pharmaceutical form of chloroquine. And doctors prescribe, and I want to be sure I say that right, chloroquine phosphate is not the same as that used for medical treatment, which is chloroquine and its relative hydroxychloroquine orally to combat malaria, as well as inflammation suffered by lupus and rheumatoid arthritis patients, meaning don't ingest aquarium cleaner. It's for fish tanks. But in proper medical form, chloroquine, the coronavirus killer President Trump's hopes it is, well, the medical community is split over the early research and the anecdotal testimonies that some experts say indicates the drug could help. The Centers for Disease Control has noted a study out of China that says chloroquine has proven effective in fighting the virus, and that several other countries also consider it a viable preventative. But top U.S. medical officials have said they do not have enough evidence or see convincing widespread clinical trials. So we shall see. Now, some, including the president and many of you, have wondered, hey, doesn't the flu and things like that slow down in warm weather? Well, warm temperatures do slow down the spread of the novel coronavirus, but don't completely eradicate it. This, according to a new study at MIT. They found that 90% of COVID-19 transmissions that occurred before Sunday happened in regions with low temperatures. That is between 37.4 and 62 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. Coronavirus cases have been reported in countries with equatorial climates and those in the southern hemisphere, but regions with the average temperature above 64.4 account for fewer than 6% of the cases. And it is already 6:51. Let's see what we need to cover before we get into any of these other issues. It's really crazy out there. Okay, let's cover one sports item, then we'll take a break, and then we'll open up the phones and see what you're doing and talk a little bit about the virus. Noah Syndergaard. If things couldn't get any worse for, well, not so much the Mets. The Yankees have pitchers out there, too. But fortunately, the Mets have a huge stock of good pitchers. But now, Thor himself, Mr. Syndergaard, he's a real millennial, isn't he? Pictures of himself. Look at my muscles. Look at me throwing a baseball. Great guy. Good for him. He'll be out for a year, maybe a year and a half now, a season and a half. He, too, has Tommy John surgery. And they put a list in the New York Post today of the pitchers on the Mets that have needed Tommy John surgery. Matt Harvey, now Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom, Steven Matz, and Zach Wheeler. Good pitchers all, but now they're going to have to go into their bag of emergency tricks, that is, the Mets will. But they've got it. They recruited a bunch of pretty solid pitchers. I mean, Rick Porcello, who was at the back of their rotation now. I think he won 14 games last year. It was like 14 and 12 or 16 and 14, something like that. The guy won a Cy Young a couple of years ago. So the Mets have certainly stocked up on starting pitchers, and as you know, they have a bunch of interesting relievers, all question marks, but could be great. Of course, Dylan Betances coming over from the Yankees after his injury. If he turns into form, you've got a real stopper there. Diaz, maybe last year was the anomaly, and he will come back strong. Same thing with, and I forgot the name of the third pitcher because my brain is almost shot, but they have another pitcher who has pitched well for them in the past, who had an off year last year. We hope that he too can do better. But more importantly, it is coming up, and we're running a little late because we had a lot of stories, but we do have to share the weather with you right now. If you're just joining us, it is Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. 41 degrees, only going to get up to 46 today. It's overcast right now, mostly cloudy though today with a few light sprinkles. The temperature again leveling off, 45, 46 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy, a temperature of 37, the wind out of the north, 5 to 15 miles an hour. Thursday, mostly sunny skies, getting up to 55. It's like every other day. One day it rains, the next day we get a respite. And of course, tomorrow, Friday morning showers giving way to increasing sunshine. The high will be 58 degrees. The overnight low will be 40. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.com. And as we get to the top of the hour, we will be supported by Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne and Kahn, Dominic's Fine Cigars, Plug-in Virtual Reality, and pluginvirtualreality.com, I should say, and our friends over at the Beachmont Tavern. We're coming up on 7 o'clock, and we certainly welcome phone calls at this point. 914. Yes, we're still going to use the hotline number, 914-999-4006, 914-999-4006. And let's go over the lineup for today, this 25th of March. Now, Vince Russo joins us at 7:20, as he always does. And at 7:35, we had to re-engineer a few things after yesterday. We'll be joined by the mayor of Mount Vernon, Sean Patterson Howard. You got tied up yesterday. It's certainly easy to understand why. Ivar Hayden joins us at 8:20. 8 o'clock, we'll probably take some more phone calls. At 8:35, A.J. Woodson, and he certainly will be talking a little bit about what's going on in Mount Vernon. And at 9 o'clock, Harlan Ullman. He's locked and loaded. We spoke last night getting ready for today's show. And there's the call now, and I love it. In New York, one step Mayor de Blasio can take to recover the credibility he needs is to fire schools chancellor Richard Carranza. Couldn't do it soon enough for my taste. Now that his honor should ever have hired Carranza, the race-baiting fraudster, that's what they call him, I just call him a straight-up racist, arrived from San Francisco via Houston 2 years ago and has since added exactly nothing positive to the city's especially troubled public schools. And it gets into all kinds of reasons why. Also, if you get a chance, go to Talk of the Sound today. Bob Cox did an update on the stories that he's been reporting, and he reported extensively Monday here on Radio Westchester about the school food programs. Excellent though they may be, and well-intended though they may be, they themselves were violating the distance rules of social distancing. But in one of the shots, he showed that obviously his story is having an effect because they actually had the thing lined off and with pylons and stuff, keeping people separate. So go on Talk of the Sound, check that out. That's an excellent story. We have a phone call. Good morning. You are on Radio Westchester. Thank you for calling.
Happy birthday, you old curmudgeon, you.
From the head curmudgeon himself. You know what kills me about this, Anthony, and welcome to the program? The fact that no matter what I do, no matter how much I whine, I'm always going to be 5 years older than you. Isn't that a killer?
Yeah, yep. It is what it is,
you
as they
like
say.
you like that built-in edge. Yeah, it's the big
Like
one,
like I
baby.
like I said, I'm the upstate speed limit. You're the autobahn speed
I
limit.
like the way you put that. Out west, the speed limit 75, and in some parts of Pennsylvania, I like that. But
You're not
that's
tall enough to be a cowboy.
I'd make a good little like a pipsqueak cowboy. The hat, I'd look like a mushroom with one of those hats on, don't you? No, who's the guy with the mustache and the little guns?
They used to have those westerns with the midget cowboy in them too. I can't remember. Was it Hopalong
Yeah,
Cassidy?
no. Do you remember that there's that famous Clint Eastwood movie where he comes into town, the guy with no name, they come to the city of hell, and there's a little person they call him now, but a midget cowboy there who kind of is the one guy who believes in him, which is kind of cool, But but why am I praising my height? I like my height. Now let me ask you a question. This is true, and all my friends know this. Now, if you laugh out loud, I'm hitting. Nah, you can. I won't hit the off button, but I have friends who don't understand that I don't think I'm short. I don't see myself in my mind's eye at 5'7". Well, I used to be before age shrinkage. Not there, folks. I never view myself as short, and they get a kick out of that. Go ahead.
When
Spend yourself.
When you look down and you're less than the personal spacing we're supposed to be keeping.
Yeah, that's well put. Oh my goodness! Can you? You know what? I look at now. I had this dream last night. I was trying to figure out why, and it had to do with my birthday. I'm sorry. I can't believe I'm talking about a dream on the air.
It's your birthday. It had to be a nightmare.
No, it was. It was. I had a dream that I did something. I couldn't figure out what it was. I think I robbed a bank or something.
We can't figure out what you're doing every morning at 6:30.
No, but and so I'm in jail, and I keep asking my lawyer, "My God, I'm 70 years old. What do you mean 12 years? I'll be dead. My life's over." And I woke up.
You reliving your business in Yorktown or what?
Yeah, probably. And I remember saying to my lawyer, "Well, what about time off for good behavior?" And then the worst part of it, my grandson was mad at me for going to jail.
Even with time off for good behavior, it's a life sentence.
I know. For those of you who are not yet 70 or odd, you all know what I'm talking about. That you kind of realize you're in the on-deck circle.
Yeah, we're on the back nine, as they say.
Yeah, the back nine.
Probably the back three, but
The
that's
back
a whole other
three.
ballgame.
So I just gave out the numbers. It's interesting. New York, it's a classic case of density. You saw the numbers before, and
Bob, if anybody didn't think that New York City was going to soar overnight,
of course,
I mean, it's don't get me wrong. This is serious. I'm not downplaying
I know you're
it
not.
at all. But the numbers that we're seeing, if people did not expect them, then they're living in an alternative reality.
Hey, what did you think of India? They closed the whole place down. 1.3 billion people. That's wild.
But think about it. Those countries can, I don't want to say get away with that. They can accomplish that to a greater degree than we can here.
Because they're not industrial the way we are.
Not only that, people are afraid of the government.
Well, that's
Over here,
true.
people don't care. Everybody looks to break the rules.
Isn't that the greatest? When you see that, I traveled, as you know, extensively in my Merrill Lynch career. And the thing that always struck me now, if you go to Japan, I liked Tokyo a lot. If you're a New Yorker, you like Tokyo. Believe me, it feels like New York, especially in the downtown. If you squint a little bit, they're all dressed for business the way we are. There are masses of people going to work. The buildings look. You could film a New York movie in downtown Tokyo. But if you go over to some of the other older districts with the kanji signs, no. But the thing that really strikes you is they actually wait for the light. Thousands of people waiting for the light. And there I am, 6 feet out. People go, what are you doing? And
when the government tells you something, you listen.
Another thing, I did a test for my daughter, and and it says a lot about America. Most of it good, because we don't like to be told what to do. I told my daughter that when you travel internationally, most international travelers in Europe and Asia have learned they get on lines like lemmings. So I shouldn't have done this, but it was an experiment. I took one of those, posts, and I put it where it says, wait here. And I put it out in the middle of the floor. And I said, I'm going to hell for this, Chris, but I want to show you something. People started lining up. It's the, and that's Americans just don't do that. It's for good or ill. And Americans, and they've done studies, Americans, and particularly men, and we're all guilty of this. Maybe not because you're a mechanic and you know better.
Show me someone who doesn't cheat on their tax
Right.
returns.
No, but what Americans tend to do, particularly men, is we don't read directions. We try and figure the device out. Where in Europe they get the booklet out and they look at it and they do it the right way. But Americans are just like we don't ask for directions. Do you?
All right, brother. Enjoy your day, and I can't wait for the knucklehead to come on.
Yeah, Vince will be on. Yeah, you can yell at him too.
I'm not going to yell at him. Like I said to you yesterday, and I'll say it publicly. I probably agree with him on more things than I disagree, but I'm thinking of actually not listening for that segment.
Go ahead.
I just can't think. Vince seems like the type of guy that really would or should or under any other circumstance would have the respect for the office of the president, not to call anybody a knucklehead.
We'll ask him about that.
I'm sure I disliked Obama as much as he dislikes Trump, and I never called him anything close to him. I mean, I might have taken him to task on issues, but I never called him a knucklehead.
We'll ask him about that.
I just think it's disrespectful.
No, we'll ask him about that. But also, there have been times, and you and I are both guilty of this. I've had to retract a couple of things I said.
No, absolutely, absolutely. But that was the point I was trying to make to you when we had our private discussion, is that it's done on a daily basis. It's not done in a sense of, I don't want to say rage, but a time of outcry, so to speak. It's done on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and that's the difference.
A time of stress. Well, listen, my fellow curmudgeon. You calling me a curmudgeon. I don't know. It's like Dracula calling
But just remember,
bat.
when we did the back-to-back, I was officially just a little bit taller than you.
You were?
Yep. You. Listen,
why do we have to be in virus land? You're talking.
Do I have to call in Mitch to verify this?
You may have to, but isn't your spine curling up like a snake?
And I was with your elevator shoes on.
All right. Thank you very much for the call. Oh, officially? I hate you now. Thank you, Anthony. Oh, God, he had to remind me of my birthday. He couldn't wait to call early. It is indeed March 25th. And I may as well go public. 70 years to the day. Now, I shouldn't do that because prospective hirers, after my business goes in the tank with all this stuff going on, who's going to want to hire a 70-year-old talk host? But then again, I'm in shape, baby. At least I think I am. All righty, it is 7 o'clock. It is 7:05, 222, or rather 99. No, it's 9. I got to do this again. 914-999-4006. 999-4006 if you'd like to join the conversation. And talking about that, that's something that you learn to do in this business is all of us, Anthony included, myself certainly, famously, I don't know that I should say famously, but at least for me, noteworthy, I called the president a phrase about 2 months ago that the next morning I absolutely had to apologize for, because I did what I don't like about the president, which is you want to get into the street, well, then let's get into the street. I use the street term to describe him. We all do that. And if I can't, I have to forgive it after it happens, but I have to call it out when it does. Now, speaking of the aforementioned president, he did say yesterday that he wanted to reopen the country for business by Easter, that's April 12, despite widespread warnings from public health experts that the worst effects of the virus were still weeks away, and that lifting restrictions now, although now is not April 12th, in place, would result in unnecessary deaths. The president said he believed a crippled economy and forced social isolation would inflict more harm than the spread of the virus. And as we've been saying, that is a tough decision that befalls chief executives in every walk of, although not usually at that level, in every walk of political life at a national level. And it's one of the reasons why, even going back to things, and I know this lights a match in some of you like Benghazi, people make mistakes, or people make decisions with the best of intentions, and sometimes they don't work out well. And I've never been inclined to want to criticize it. Now, Of course, people will say, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not, that this is politically driven. But perhaps we should think that it's not. Perhaps we should think that this president or any president is wearing the great burden. What is that heavy lies, the crown, the head that bears the crown? People are going to die. And people are going to die for both reasons. Some people will lose their jobs and be so depressed about it that they will die. They will kill themselves, or they will get sick, or their immune systems will be so compromised, or their children will get sick because they don't have enough to eat, or they will become homeless. Whether or not the president reopens, and I don't think there'll be any massive reopening anyway, even if the president proceeds as he does, people are going to die. And people are going to die if he doesn't do it. And again, people are going to lose their homes. People are going to be homeless. People are going to lose their businesses. I could lose this one. Although I have a number of different ways I think around that. But so this isn't about this radio station per se. I'm making a point that people are going to suffer no matter what the president does. And he will take a hit for it. And we really have to be. It's one of the reasons why, as much as I disagree with Dick Cheney, I have read all his books. Dick Cheney made some decisions I did not agree with when he was vice president. He was the most powerful vice president we've ever had. I didn't agree with him on torture. I didn't agree with some of his attitudes that we'd be greeted as liberators when we went to Iraq. But these are men and women in those positions now that have to make the most awful decisions. And we really have to stop attacking. We can say we disagree with it. And we can even say that some decisions, and George Bush's decision to go into Iraq, which frankly I supported at the time. I don't know that I've ever mentioned that. I was wrong, and it turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction. And then we managed the war horribly. And we blew millions and billions of dollars. One story I did, one of the first stories I ever did about war, was how a pallet of money with $13 billion on it sitting in the ambassador's office over there, one of them, no one knows where it went. No one knows where the money went. So those are bad outcomes. But in terms of making it hard on these individuals, yes, we should hold them accountable. But all I'm asking people to do in this instance is cut the president a little slack here, or whomever the president is. Now, again, as Vince said yesterday, and I tend to agree with it, this is a president who, and Harlan Ullman will be talking about this later on, who has wasted a lot of his credibility by saying things before he understood them, by lying so outright even his supporters know he did, and by saying silly things. So, yeah, I get it, but when it comes to this decision, if and when he makes it or doesn't, he's going to take a hit. So try and remember how difficult these jobs are and how awful are their decisions to make as we come up on 7/10. Now, here in New York, the governor has, again, become almost a little folk hero. And this isn't to push or not. I've been pretty critical of him over the years, particularly the way he changed the spots. He went in office 12 years ago, I guess now about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, as center right. Then he became center left. Then he went all left. Now he's just competent in a very good way, because this is up his alley. This is what he does well. And but the real issue here is what's going to happen in New York. We've seen cases, as he said, he threw one number out from 50 to 50,000 in a month. Now, geometric progression means it keeps just like compounding interest. If it was 50,000 in a month, it's going to be, 6 degrees of separation? It's going to evolve even greater. Oh, wow, happy birthday's on my phone. Thank you very much, Phil Simone. We're going to see, according to the governor, some 50,000 people in ICU in about a month. And in New York City, and I can't even comprehend that number because right now we have 5,000 intensive care beds. And so now they're even considering in New York City, for example, and I keep saying city when I should say state, but in New York City, in this specific case, they're thinking of closing the parks. Now, they sort of closed them here, and I have mixed feelings about that. So long as people are out there, okay, and they are keeping separate, they're jogging by themselves, they're, as I might be, skating by themselves, or one or two people keeping their distance, I don't see any harm with that. And it's a good stress reliever and all the rest of it, and people have to stay in shape. We should close them in the sense that you can't be congregating, but you can't just lock everything down, can you? Or can you? I'm not really sure. It is 7:12. 3 more minutes, and we'll cover some more weather. But those are the issues that are making news today. Now, the economy is just taking a hit. Now, you noticed yesterday, though, that the stock market came back. 2,000 the futures were up today about 600 by about 600. Yesterday the market recovered a lot, 2,000, and what they're trying to determine, and they haven't considered it yet, is have we reached a floor? Have we reached a point where the market will go down no further? And one of the things I always emphasize from my Wall Street days, the market works like this. It goes down like this, it goes up like this. And so what chartists and analysts are always looking at, where's the bottom? Now, you can't go down forever because companies, believe me, have an intrinsic value. Now, we've lost a staggering amount of trillions of dollars. I forget what the number is, maybe like $30 trillion in market value. That means the value of a stock based on how it's listed, not the true value of a company. So floors are established, A, by the willingness of people to buy that security, but also when a stock price gets so low that now the actual value of the company, you could sell off the pieces, you could sell off the equipment, you could sell off the trucks, you could sell off the computers and get more money back than the prices. That is a true floor, particularly if the company is established, sells a product that is needed and has a history of generating cash. And that's when we'll reach a floor. So people panicking about the stock market, yeah, it's scary to see your 401k, but there will be bargains. And when this is over, it's going to be a very interesting market, at least in my view. Let's go to the telephone. Good morning. Oh, did I hit the wrong button? I'm sorry. I must have put the person on too quickly. I do that. 222, not 222, that's the phone that's not working. 914-999-4006. And my apologies for that. I patched the person in too quickly while I was finishing my monologue. But just to remind you, the market will come back. It always does. The market not coming back is like saying the sun won't come up in the morning. Eventually it will. You have good companies with good management that sell a product that people need, and you put monies in people's hands, as this new stimulus package of $2 trillion does, and you will have a stock market. Now, there are other kinds of markets out there. The bond market's pretty scary, what with zero interest rates. And, of course, it makes the value of old instruments that have 2 or 3% and more percent to pay a little more valuable right now, but that assumes that they won't default at this point. So that is, by the way, why people love municipal bonds and why they don't pay much, because municipalities have the ability to tax, which means they can take the money from you whether you want to or not. Let's go to the weather. And again, I apologize to whomever I accidentally hung up on, but we do have to share the weather with you. It is 7:16. And I hate when my computers that black out should be destroyed. Alrighty, the weather still, it's 41 right now and overcast on this Wednesday, March 25th, 2020. It's going to get up to 45 today, but not before we endure a few light showers or sprinkles. It'll get down to 39 tonight, partly cloudy. Tomorrow, a nice day, mostly sunny skies, 55 degrees, kissing 60. Friday, showers again. It's every other day. Morning showers giving way to increasing sunshine. We can deal with that. Getting up to near 60 degrees, 40 at night. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. And it's right here in New Rochelle. Visit uhgc.org. And if you think it's easy to answer the phone, press buttons, and talk at the same time, I got a bridge to sell you. All righty. We're not quite at the bottom of the hour yet, but we're headed there. This hour is supported by Plug-in Virtual Reality, Dominic's Fine Cigars, a law firm of Pena & Con, Aging Issues Management, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern. You know what I'm tempted to do? I got to find obscure music to do this. Like, I like NPR. A lot of good news comes there, but their style, which is intentionally bland, sometimes they go like this, and they say, this next hour is supported by the Bob Marrone Foundation. And then there's some obscure jazz piece that you never heard, and as you're nodding out, you finally wake up when some newsman or woman has something interesting to say, and they do have good coverage. Okay, let's go to the telephone and see who's there. Good morning, you're on Radio Westchester.
Happy birthday, you old goat.
Oh, you and Anthony now. Good. Nausea and re-nausea. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, folks, I have an announcement to make. I need announcement music. Hold on. Which one? This is the big announcement. Let me get this radio piece on here. No, I don't want you. Which is the one? Crisis report. That's it. This is big news. We have to do this. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an announcement to make. Vince Russo of New Jersey has actually fixed his phone. This chronic, ill-timed timepiece, 7 minutes off the mark, despite the world clock, computer clocks everywhere, clocks at Grand Central Station. Big Ben himself. He finally opened up his phone yesterday like the geek he is. And what did you discover?
Well, I discovered that you could actually change the time on your phone. I thought it just came from Verizon, and that was what the time was.
And meanwhile, I have this transmitter here that is coordinated around the bleeping planet. All right, now let's compare times again, folks, because he's not exactly perfect. It's 7:19 and 51 seconds.
Well, I don't have the seconds, but I have the 7:19.
Okay, well, which is why you called on time.
What do you get it from, the Naval Observatory or something?
Yeah, from the. You know where I get it? You should know. You go to church. Well, you used to go to church before they threw you out. I get it from the Almighty himself. He's up there with a little hourglass. No, you see, I always have this thing that God likes to mess around with me. Like he's up there with St. Peter. Hey, Pete, come in here. Check this out. Look, Bob Marrone just started a business and the economy tanked. Oh, this is great, JC. This is wonderful. God, let's see if he can be hit by a car on the way home. All right, bring more wine. Carlo, no, Peter, more wine. Now, have you been in contact with your church?
Yes, of course. Our pastor hasn't had in-house services because of this situation, and she put a service on YouTube last Sunday.
MeTube or YouTube?
Yeah.
They should name it MeTube. Now, did you actually have a YouTube service?
Yeah. She conducted the service on YouTube.
Okay, and did you participate? Now, do you guys have the same thing? You pray, blah, 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 amen, kneeling down, standing up?
No.
Bending over backwards?
I wouldn't join a church where you had to kneel down. I am past that. At my age, I don't kneel.
Your knees, you couldn't kneel.
I do not do that.
You couldn't beg for your life or get engaged. Please.
No.
The good thing is if ISIS caught you, they wouldn't cut your head off because you couldn't kneel. Here, take the green. They take the orange suit. You'll give your head to Allah. And you have to say, no, not me. No, I can't kneel. Oh, you're off their hook.
Well, speaking of YouTube, that's one of the things that I've been doing, while I'm here in the house, with I've been reading and doing things like that. But I've been watching on YouTube. They have a lot of old documentaries that are really good and old industrial films. And I was watching a promotional film that Chevron had put out back in the late 1950s.
We're seeing how he spends his free time, folks. Go ahead.
And and of course the guy with that stentorian voice, and as a Chevron service station owner, you can make a lot of money by taking care of your customers. And so you see the customer pulls into the station, and three guys come running out of the little house, and they're in white coveralls and a bow tie, and one guy is putting the gas in, one guy's checking the oil, one guy is checking the tires, and the narrator keeps saying, and as salesman, you have an opportunity for a sale, Ask the customer, do you want premium or regular gasoline? And it went on like that, and it kind of harkens back to the days when companies actually wanted to provide service.
Well, they did, and they also, as you know, they did dorky commercials though. I mean, like remember every transmission, it's Power Glide. Now Power Glide is something you buy in a sex toy store, but the Power Glide transmission. Oh, I do remember something. I want to see if you remember this old commercial. Now I'm going to get calls and stuff, but Choo Choo Charlie was an engineer. Good and plenty. Yeah. Well, I sung that for a woman once, and she never talked to me again. Choo Choo Charlie. Choo Choo Charlie was an engineer.
Yeah.
Charlie says, "Love my good and plenty." Remember little Alka-Seltzer?
Alka-Seltzer, of course. Sure.
Kent with the micronite. What the hell was a micronite filter? I still got lung cancer. Not me, but.
Yeah, so it was interesting how, in the industrial films, like these early films on how steel is made or how, copper wire and things like that, there was a great history of the Ford Motor Company, right from the very beginning, showing Henry Ford and the original cars he made and how the production lines came about and things like that. Really interesting stuff. One I really enjoyed was the history of the Boeing 747.
Oh, I watch all those plane things.
Where they showed the production of the plane. And, it's interesting with those kinds of things because, they went through the whole design. And, of course, the Boeing 747 was designed in the late 1960s, so computers were nascent. I mean, they were not very prevalent.
You had to make a prototype.
Yeah, and so what they did all this testing, wind tunnels and all this other kind of stuff. And then they had the big rollout, all these dignitaries there, and they
still do when they roll out a new plane, V.
Yeah, so they pulled the plane out of the hangar, and after all the festivities are over, then you realize some poor schlub has got to get in the cockpit of this thing and actually try to fly it. Because all of the design in the world, they think it all works, but here you have this aircraft that actually has to get up in the air. And, they did, of course, and they showed the test flights. And one of the interesting ones, they had, of course, a little chase plane to film it. And, you see the thing going along, and, one of the later tests they did, I guess as part of FAA regulations or whatever, they said, and now the pilots have got to stall the plane. And you see them, lifting the nose angle up,
until it starts to sink,
And then all of a sudden you see this thing just sinking by the tail, and you're going, holy moly,
I have to go there because now, again, I have to remember when I do the show, I can't just talk about things that interest me. But as you know, I love airplanes. It's my second favorite hobby after hockey and books, probably. But there is a show, if you really love old airplanes, folks, called Buffalo Air. And it is about this, and it's true. It's a one reality show I watch religiously when I can still find it. I watched it all, and now they have new episodes finally on, I guess, the Weather Channel. And Buffalo Air is an airline in the Northwest Territories of Canada. And they use vintage World War II planes. Because of the length of runways, they can't use modern jets, although they do use an Electra, which is a turboprop. Great turboprop, by the way. They used to fly to Boston, run the Boston Shuttle. And they have one of those, but the rest are C-46s and DC-3s. And they're all refurbished, and they take off at 30 degrees below zero. So places like Yellowknife and other places up north of the Arctic Circle, it's the only way people can get stuff. Yeah. And it is fascinating how they keep these things running anyway. I love all that stuff. Now, the quiz, do you know the first plane to be designed only by computer and they didn't need a prototype? Well, the first in America.
I want to say the 767.
No, the 777.
Okay.
Which is a wonderful plane, just a beautiful airplane. And
the underlying theme I found in all of these films that I've been watching, vintage stuff, is this can-do American spirit. Where
it's going to bail us out too.
All of these inventions, all of these great industrial accomplishments were because people felt, we can do this. We can get to the moon. We can build cars. We can build airplanes and things like that. Just that indomitable spirit that propelled business in this country to some really great things. And I think we're lacking that. I think we have such an attitude in this country. Well, we don't make anything anymore, so that's...
Well, I don't think we lack that so much as it exists in isolated places, but it still exists. I mean, you've got from Tesla to Facebook to, it's still there, but the need has to be seen. And I think that's what's going to bail us out of this. You worked on Wall Street. This crisis is going to create financial products we're not even aware of yet.
Yeah, that's a little scary.
Well, it is and it's not. The great paradox about Wall Street, and I don't know if you heard my monologue 2 weeks ago, but one of the things that's very heartening, as you know, when I say Wall Street, folks, I'm talking about the financial industry around the world. As we speak, day or night, wherever it is, there are literally tens of thousands of men and women who make their living checking out screens, following wires, news stories, Reuters, Bloomberg, looking for the price of something to be lower than what it ought to be. And they're going to buy it and sell it at a higher price. And it is what keeps the value of things real in this world. And now, again, are they selfish, greedy people? Yeah, it's like the acid in your stomach, but absolutely needed. And that gives me a lot of faith.
Well, see, I think part of the problem we're experiencing now with the stock market is quite the opposite of that, and that is most of the trading now is done by computers. They put algorithms in, and once stocks reach certain levels, whether it's up or down, it triggers all this buying and selling.
Yes.
And what it does is it takes the judgment of the human analyst out of it. I'll give you an example. In normal times, if a company announces that their earnings were 24 cents a share instead of 26 cents a share, the stock drops by 20%.
That's true. However, that you can also, again, it's what you input. You can put in tolerances to obviate an overly emotional market so that it either shuts down or trading in that security is frozen. You can also do that. It depends on how you program it, as you know better than I.
Well, that's true, but I don't think they do that. I don't think.
They did it this time. They did it a week ago.
Well, they had to do that now. I mean, because these dives are obviously just insane. But I don't think that the human element, the human analysis is there, and because if a company, as I said,
I beg to differ. The human analysis, though, is juxtaposed to that. If the computers take a price, if they decrease the value of a stock more than someone sitting at a trader's terminal, they'll buy it. I mean, that's the beauty of it. I mean, it's the hedge. I'm not trying to say it always works. Do you know that great movie Wall Street? But do you know what the greatest line in that movie? That's if you're a Wall Streeter, and that was embedded in that movie that people didn't understand, and it's oh my God, the breakup value is worth twice the price.
Twice the price, right?
Which is, in other words, if I sell all the assets off, it's more valuable than the public price, and so that always creates a floor. And sooner or later you get there, because one of the things that people don't want to know is half the time that the stock market is based on promise and the future, and it's artificially inflated.
That's right, and you saw that especially with companies when they began, like Amazon.
The geek crisis.
They weren't making any money, and the stock price kept going up.
Do you know?
They were betting on the company doing well and increasing sales and profits over time.
Well, you remember, and some of us benefited from it, others didn't. But in general, during the tech boom in the late '90s, a lot of people would come up to me and say, "Is that a good stock?" And I'd say, "Hell no." But if you're speculating, there's a chance it'll go up. What do you mean by that? I said they have no history of making money. We don't know how good they're. In other words, if you shouldn't be buying a stock unless you're speculating. It's a different investment. This isn't an investment show, folks. But you buy a stock because that's why the guy out in Omaha is so rich. He sees good management. He sees continued growth. He sees management of expenses, and he sees continued growth because of the nature of the product. But a lot of people don't know that that's why you buy stock. They think you buy it. I mean, you also do it for the reasons of the future and speculation. But buying on spec is a very different thing than investing.
Yeah.
And most people don't know that. That's why the public are suckers in a lot of cases.
Well, the public is always behind the curve. I mean, they're always, all the bargains have been bought up. I remember when we worked on Wall Street, and you had to do any kind of trading, you had to go through compliance. You had to go.
We did then, yes.
Yeah, you had to give all these reasons, and blah blah blah. And I know I got my wrist slapped a few times. But you know what? What they were trying to weed out the little guy.
Yep.
But all the front running was done by
As you know, the second
way more money than I'll ever imagine.
The second half of my Wall Street career was spent in the capital market side, the institutional side of the business. And I hate saying this, folks, because they're needed. They keep the value of things real, but they have contempt for individual investors. Contempt. If you're not a government, if you're not a big player, if you're not a company to be sold, and there are those who say, no, I don't, and then secretly get off the phone and say, boy, was Bob right. Contempt for individual investors.
Yeah.
And the people that service them, by the way. If you remember at Merrill, they chased them all out of running the businesses. They intimidated Kamansky right out the door.
Yeah, and they ruined a once great old company.
Yeah,
they just ruined it.
They sent the icon of the company, then Lonnie Steffens, who built who started the debit card, and they chased him out of the company, and then they put in that stooge in the company that burned it up, O'Neill. Yeah, and they gave him $100 million to get the bleep out of there. And they ruined a wonderful company, and they had contempt for the employees, and they had contempt for their customers. What a freaking mess that became. It was a great company once, though.
The documentary on the Ford Motor Company really was very illustrative of how there's such a dichotomy in all things that you look at. Hey, here was Henry Ford, who was illiterate. He couldn't read or write, and yet he came up with all of these concepts and came up with all of these designs for automobiles in the beginning, created this enormous company, revolutionized manufacturing, and did a whole bunch of good things that were not really directly related to auto manufacturing.
Oh, yeah.
He started in Dearborn. He started like a little Ford cooperative, so to speak, and he had the Henry Ford Hospital so that the employees could go to the hospital. And when he hired doctors, he told them, you're not going to be judged and paid on how many patients you see. He said, because I don't care about numbers. He said, you're going to be judged on outcomes. How many people?
You sound like Dr. Sternberg now.
Yeah,
That's how he speaks.
So he did that. He had company store, not in the classic case where he ripped off the employees, but where he gave employees, products at discounts and things like that.
Oh, yeah. By the way, that beep is for you. But before you go, Anthony just texted. Remember S&H Green Stamps?
S&H Green Stamps, yeah, of course.
Vince, thank you very much. We're probably going to call you back later. We want to call you to task. You got to answer for Santino, Carlo. I'll explain that later. Thank you very much. Vince Russo, everyone. And we got to get ready for our next guest, who we are anxious to talk with. But first, we need, and if you would stand by, Mayor Sean Patterson Howard is standing by. We need to take a look at the weather one more time. The weather is brought to you by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.org. And it's overcast, 42 now. It's only going to get up to 45 or 46 today, mostly cloudy with a few light showers. Partly cloudy this evening. Getting down to 37. That is from a high of about 46. On into Thursday, mostly sunny. On into Thursday, that's correct. Mostly sunny skies tomorrow. The temperature will be 55. The wind out of the north 5 to 15. And Friday, continuing in our every other day. Friday, we will have more liquid. We will have rain, but not too much. Morning showers giving way to increasing sunshine, getting up to near 60, and it's a great pleasure. She was tied up yesterday, and we certainly understand when chief executives of cities and counties and states and the president get tied up these days with what's going on, and we were grateful that she could come on this morning. She is the mayor of Mount Vernon. Please welcome Sean Patterson Howard. Good morning, Mayor. How are you?
Good morning, Bob. How are you?
You chose a really good time to run for mayor, I'll tell you.
Look, it's a great time. This is one of those situations that push the good qualities out of you. Pressure brings out good things.
Isn't that the truth? Even in this business, one of my favorite photographs is a picture of me, and this is my alma mater, WVOX. I was on during Sandy.
Yes.
With a candle in the middle of the room and a blanket on, and the transmitter going from gasoline power, and telling ghost stories in the middle of the night. Never gets better. Never gets better than working during a crisis. And
that's right.
I guess for you too. Now, you got ahead of yourself 2 weeks ago with the best of intentions and said no more barbershops. And then the governor's orders, though, you had to follow his, so you had to reverse it. Now you had to do it again. Are you getting pushback on that?
What? Well, look, I came out on the 16th.
Yep.
And I did what I could do based on Article 24, of General Municipal Law. But 2 days later, the governor updated his state of the emergency, and said that what he put out would have to be the law of the land for the state. And so I had to reverse it, and literally the next day, he instituted it again.
Right. So no, and that was by no means a criticism on my part, because I know we found some stories that some people are putting salons in their homes, and we just keep telling them, look, no one's going to go inside your house, but please be careful.
Absolutely be careful. Bob, this crisis is causing us to kind of go back to the old way of doing things. I as a little girl, 90% of my hair appointments up until the time I was maybe in high school was in someone's kitchen.
Oh, yeah. My mother used to braid my sister's hair every morning. I don't know how she did that.
So, yes, there are some people who are going to do hair in their kitchen because we are Americans and we have an entrepreneurial spirit, and people still have to make money. But the thing is, once again, especially if you're bringing people into your home, make sure that whoever you're bringing into your home, I know that you're going to trust, and B, make sure that they're not bringing sickness into your home. So if nothing else, if people are operating out of their homes, hopefully they will be very careful not to bring sickness into their home.
Well, we can hope and pray for that. Mayor, I know I was looking at the numbers this morning. You have 81 cases in Mount Vernon. You have one nursing home that has 21 alone, and that has to be troubling to you. Have you been in touch with that nursing home?
Absolutely. Look, I believe a lot of their infections happened early on, before people really started paying attention to what was happening here, and it spread. But since then, they've worked with the Department of Health. We've spoken with them. They've put in place really containment practices, and they are serving all of the meals to the residents in their rooms. They're practicing social distancing. They've expanded their protocols. This is something unprecedented. So I'm not going to beat them up. When you have people living in congregate care facilities very closely, when you are dealing with the elderly, when you're dealing with people who have compromised immune systems due to age and maybe other situations, this is something that can happen. So I don't want to tear them down as an institution. But I'm glad that they have now instituted practices that will hopefully contain this. This is a difficult and a very different time that we're living in.
It sure is, Mayor. And now you've got a city to run while all this goes on. How is your police force, your EMS, and other issues? And then a little later, towards the end of the interview, you can go over what's closed, what's not. But how are your police forces? How's the hospital working out? We understand, is this true? And we'll be talking with A.J. Whitson later as well. Is it true that they ran out of supplies at the Mount Vernon Hospital?
They've run out of supplies at every hospital, Bob. Every hospital. I've spoken to people throughout Monty systems. I've spoken to people in other healthcare systems, and they don't have proper masks. They have gloves, but insofar as the proper masks that the nurses and the doctors and the ER workers feel that they need to be able to stay safe in this pandemic, they don't have. This is something that no one ever expected. Generally, you use basic surgical masks, but for something like this, the N95 NIOSH approved masks are really what is better suited, and those are just in short supply. Westchester County EOC doesn't have them in stock.
They're scarcer than hen's teeth.
I've called construction companies. I've called auto repair places that usually will have these masks in stock for when they're painting cars. I've called carpentry places that use these masks as they're doing woodwork, and they're just not around. So, look, I have lots of criticisms of Montefiore, but this will not be one.
Okay,
they don't have masks. No one has them.
Quite
fair-minded. So I don't want to take a cheap shot.
Quite fair-minded of you. We're talking with the mayor of Mount Vernon, Sean Patterson Howard, who decided to become mayor after financial scandals and a recalcitrant controller, a move with the major park that's been in the news for 10 years. Anything else? Any other Armageddon-like things you have to deal with, Mayor? What else is going on in Mount Vernon that you need to talk to your citizens about?
Well, I really just want to give a lot of encouragement and a shout-out and some praise to our first responders, our fire department, our police department, our DPW workers, our water department, our EMS workers. They are out there, boots on the ground every day. They still have to fight fires. They still have to deal with public safety. They still have to collect garbage. They still have to make sure that our sewer system and our water lines are operating. And they still have to respond to calls for emergency medical care. And they're out there doing it. And we are working hard to ensure that we are keeping them safe because, look, they are having very deep, personal contact with people as a part of their job. And it's been really hard to keep them safe. We have 3 firefighters who have tested positive for coronavirus. All of them went on a call together, and so they were exposed, but they are doing well right now. So I will be reaching out to call each of them, and as well as others who might be home experiencing symptoms and waiting to be tested. Our police department has been impacted. Several of our police officers, as well as our civilians in the police department, have been impacted. We haven't heard anything coming from DPW yet, but it is. Look, I'm concerned about all of our citizens, but when your first responders become impacted, it definitely impacts the way that you have to operate going forward. And so, just like the nursing home, we have enhanced our standard operating procedures and our different safety protocols, and we've upgraded our personal protective equipment. We've had to do all of those things just to really ensure their safety and to reduce the risk of infection during this difficult time.
How much of City Hall is coming to work at these days?
Well, the governor ordered, as of the 22nd of March, 100% workforce reduction for all non-essential employees, for government, for business, for not-for-profit. So in the building right now, we probably have about 20 people off and on. Some of them, we have forwarded our phones. We are accessing our computers from home and our email. People are coming in on reduced schedules and alternating schedules because the city still has to run. So the clerk's office, the assessor's office, the controller's office, every single one of our offices has people in them, but we are just not open to the public, meaning having the public come in and out of City Hall. And the reason for that is because we just don't have enough people to continue to decontaminate the building when you're dealing with the public. And we have to keep our staff safe, and we need to refocus some of our efforts. So some of our staff that are working remotely have actually been assigned to food distribution. That's become a major, major issue in Mount Vernon during this time as people, as children are out of school and they're not being, fed all of their regular meals. And while the school district has grab-and-go locations where the children can come and get breakfast and lunch, there are 4 of them while there are 16 schools. And so not all of the children are getting up to walk maybe that distance to go get it.
Oh, of course.
And so we're doing a lot of home-delivered meals.
That's
doing
a good
lot
thing.
Of delivering of groceries.
Because one of the things we ran into in New Rochelle, and it has since been remedied, people were congregating at these sites in ways that contradicted the keep 6 feet away from one another. So they had to put up cones and lines and everything else. Now, your budget's going to be impacted. And one hopes, knowing what you deal with in New Rochelle, in Mount Vernon, you've got to get a chief of staff. You have other positions you need to fill. This is going to be a trying time, but budget-wise for you, is it not?
It's going to absolutely be a trying time in Mount Vernon and everywhere else. We may not have the same reserves as other communities, but hopefully we will be able to get some sort of relief through FEMA, the state, the federal level, to just provide some support. It's going to impact government. It's impacting, small businesses. It's impacting some of our larger businesses right now.
Oh, God, yes.
When you get rid of alternate side of the street parking and when you close the stores, you're not going to get that sales tax revenue. And when stores are closed, you don't have people parking in your downtown, and so you're losing parking revenue. We're definitely going to be impacted, and so we're sitting looking at what we're going to do and how we're going to respond to this. I can say that in Mount Vernon, what we have done, and I'm not sure what other communities have done, this crisis is very different. If it was an active shooter, if it was a hurricane or a natural disaster, you would usually bring a team of people to your emergency operations center and kind of put in place your incident command system or your incident management system. But we can't do that for this. we have
cannot,
to keep people
Mayor.
separate from each other.
Now, Mayor,
so we've created a virtual emergency operations center. And our chief of operations for the fire department, Chief Odendo, is serving as our incident command director, and we have a coordinated response to this. The footprint of this is the entire city. The duration, we don't know how long it's going to last, and so our police commissioner, fire commissioner, DPW, deputy commissioner, our director of Office of Emergency Management, and fire and our water commissioner are all working together as the command staff. We've put together a finance operational team, a operationals group, a logistics group, a planning group, and a situational awareness group so that we understand what's happening in and around the city 24 hours a day. So we know how to continue to respond, whether it's working. We've just put together a supermarket and bodega task force yesterday.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Say more about that, because they are going, well, at least the supermarkets and bodegas are still open, but still, the business is cut down. People are raiding certain shelves. Now, what's that task force going to do?
Well, so that task force, when we saw a news article the other day about ShopRite that quite a few of their employees were infected, and
right after I shopped there, right? I just wanted to cover that, but go ahead, May.
Yeah, that they had lots of people infected, and that's going to happen. I said to our team, we do conference calls. There are about 50 of us that are on a conference call every day. At the same time, and we schedule it after the governor's briefing and before the county executive's briefing, just so we know how we're doing as an integrated leadership team and how we're responding. And so that task force started yesterday. They went out to our different supermarkets and started visiting some of the bodegas just to see what type of decontamination procedures and health precautions they have in place. If they were using cones, if they were limiting the number of people who could be in the stores at one time, were they wiping down, were their staff wearing masks and gloves at the cash register, just really how they were handling it. Because in your food establishments, if someone is sick there, then that can easily and rapidly spread this virus. So we just want to make sure that our supermarkets and our corner stores and bodegas are practicing proper prevention methods that are CDC and State Department of Health recommended. And we actually were very surprised and pleased to find that Stop and Shop had put up kind of plexiglass barriers at their cash registers, that people were using cones, and at the checkout line they were keeping people at a distance. So only one person could really be at the conveyor belt at one time, and people had to stand behind cones, and they just really measured it out. So they're practicing social distancing in their stores. We will be going through the different bodegas today. We also have another task force that's making sure that the non-essential businesses that are not supposed to be operating are not operating. Because, again, the governor ordered them closed, and we want to make sure that people are following along with what they need to do. We have a human services group that, like I said, is really focusing on feeding. But one of the other things that I think not only in Mount Vernon but throughout the county that they're finding is domestic violence calls are increasing.
Yeah, I was just looking at a piece, and when you're off, but I'll share it with you now. Listen to this. In fact, it was semi-humorous, but it really isn't funny. It's a daily update I get that comes in about this time every day. And how not to kill your spouse when you're both working from home. We're both shouting into our laptops. Couples and therapists weigh in with tips on how to manage the ups and downs of work life under one roof with your partner. There are lots of arguments, and there is an increase in domestic violence. Absolutely.
And there's just a lot of stress in the house right now.
And then if you got 2 or 3 kids,
the parents are home. If you have a multi-generational family, the grandparents might be there. People are used to being able to get up and move about and go out, and they can't do that right now. And it's not as if it's like a Saturday or Sunday and you're just home together. It's a weekday, and parents are working online from home. Children are doing homework online from home. Parents are trying to make sure that they can get their work done, but then they also have to turn around and be responsible for their children during the day doing their schoolwork, which is not something that we usually do unless you're a homeschooled child. So there's greater stress, especially if the kids don't want to do that. So there can be a lot of tension in the home.
Oh, God, yes. I mean, in fact, it's going to remind people who are working home with their spouses now, never go into business with your spouse. Oh, 7:54. Someone will end up dead.
You need to have a special relationship. I think it will also help people to value educators more.
Oh, absolutely.
Much more. We love our children. My daughter is 28 and amazing and was a A student and did very, very, very well in school. But doing her homework sometimes at night with her and having to check it used to drive me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So I couldn't imagine having to kind of go into a mode where I'm homeschooling my child, in essence, and I'm working from home at the same time.
Well, Mayor, I'm a lot older than you are, and there was this period they went through called the new math.
Yes.
My daughter was on her own. I said, I cannot help you. I don't have a clue. I don't care to have a clue. Please, leave me alone. But but imagine having 3 kids and a toddler and a screaming baby. Apropos of that, there's a piece in the Times today. Some women are going to have to give their baby. We need midwives. They can't have their baby in the hospital. Some women are going to have to do it all by themselves or with their petrified husbands.
And that's very true right now. So whether it's women having to give birth at home or them kind of opening up some really sanitized birthing centers, that's something that they're going to have to look at. And then additionally, I was speaking to a woman who lost her husband last Friday.
God.
And I spoke to her on Saturday, and he was an elderly gentleman. He died of COVID-19.
Yep.
And they can't see his body. They can't go to the funeral home. They can't do any of that.
Well, nobody can do anything. I have some family that, which would go nameless for privacy's sake, going in for some very important procedures today, and I can't visit them or even go to the waiting room. Can't even do it.
I have an aunt that's in the hospital, and my cousins are very frustrated because they can't visit her. You can't visit people at nursing homes. But, I mean, at a time when someone has died, whether it's of COVID or anything else, and you cannot visit the funeral home, when you cannot perform any burials and funerals right now, and definitely if you are Muslim or if you are Jewish and you have certain laws around death and burial that you have to follow for your religion, and that's interfered with and made difficult at this time, it just exacerbates the trauma of this time.
Absolutely. In fact, a friend of mine has a double whammy. He is in a nursing home. He's a veteran, and his brother passed away, and he wanted to go to the wake, but he could not even go to the wake or funeral for his own brother because he wasn't allowed out.
Right. It's a challenging time. But, I'm going to say this. One of the things that I spoke about during my campaign, and when I came into City Hall and I spoke with my leadership team, I said it was time to break down the silos, that we could not operate in silos as an organization, as a city, that we had to find a way to create integrated teams and cross-trained teams. And that is one of the things that this crisis is really forcing us to do right now as we're redeploying staff to different areas. I mean, goodness, I feel like I'm in the military right now, redeployment. But as we really redeploy and reassign people to work in different departments and to perform different functions, maybe not based on what they've been hired to do, but what they have some skills to do, as this has brought out different needs and requests of city government, people are really getting to know one another and respect each other and work together in different ways. And so that is one thing that I continuously hear from the staff is that they're gaining a new appreciation of one another. They're gaining an appreciation and an understanding of what other departments do and how they serve the city and how what each of us do in our various departments really come together to perform cohesive government. And so we are breaking down silos, we are building new teams, and we are empowering and developing new leaders that may not have been identified if this had not come to pass.
I agree with that very wholeheartedly. Mayor, is there anything you'd like to shout out to your city about before we let you go?
I just want to say to my city, please stay home and stay healthy. We need people to stay at home right now. We should not be required to have the governor say that there's a 24-hour curfew. We need people to stay home. Think of your health. If you're not worried about your health, think of what you could bring back home to your family or to the elders in your family. And the other thing is that when you are outside, please practice social distancing. Containment and prevention is the only way that we're going to beat this right now. We don't want people to be afraid, but we do want them to take it seriously and plan and focus on prevention and definitely continue to operate and exercise good hygiene. Wash your hands, and then wash your hands again with warm soap and water. So that's really what I want to say to people. And to take care of themselves and use the time that we are spending at home to enjoy your friends, enjoy your family. Not enjoy your friends by going to their house, but enjoy your family. Check in on your elders, check in on your neighbors, and just take time out to take care of yourself and enjoy your family. As Americans, we never stop, and this is causing us to pause and take a moment right now, and hopefully we're reflecting and we're investing times in ourselves and in our families at this time.
You know, Mayor, you just reminded me to put some Purell on my own hands. Thank you very much. The Mayor of Mount Vernon, keep on keeping on. Sean Patterson Howard, thank you so very much.
Thank
you.
Take
a break. We'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
And we're back, just doing a little organizational stuff here. Welcome once again. It is 8:02. Time flies. I'm sorry. Yes, 8:02. Time flies when you're having fun. Coming up this hour, we're going to talk with Ivar Hayden and AJ Woodson. And we just checked in with AJ a little bit ago. And at 9 o'clock, Harlan Ullman will be with us. Let's reset once and for all. You're listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am Bob Marrone. This is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. It is 41, getting up to 46 today. It's overcast right now. It'll be mostly cloudy, maybe a few light showers, and then tonight partly cloudy. Tomorrow, a nice day, mostly sunny skies. The temperature will be 55. And I wanted to share with you while we had you. And once again, if you're listening on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, some problems today, we know. Periscope, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Mornings with Bob Marrone, whatever. Welcome to the program. Radio Jar. We have about 8 or 9 platforms now. Welcome to the program once again. What we're trying to do is mix in a lot of stuff along with all the corona coverage. We realize you need that. I want to shout out to Melissa Lonke. She sent me a happy birthday. Thank you very much. She's monitoring the show and criticizing every other word I say. But I like Melissa a lot because she's a whole 2 feet shorter than I am. But thank you for the happy birthday wishes. Here's the deal. There's a number of, we just got some of these updates, and I need to share them with you. If I could only open them up between my computer and my second item here, my phone. Where was I? There I am. Pandemics. Okay, one of the things they're saying is a lot of discord, of course, which we just talked about at home among people who are working at home and also having kids at home. Try and hang in there. This is according to ABC News. And what they're saying is all kinds of stuff. Now, ABC News just added this. U.S. Airlines. Now, get this. They're preparing for a possible domestic travel shutdown. They don't believe one is imminent, but it absolutely could happen. Major U.S. airlines preparing for that possibility, but they do not believe it is imminent. Sources explain to ABC News that they need to be ready for anything due to the unpredictable and fluid situations surrounding COVID-19. Now, Vince, who was with us earlier today, his brother had to fly back to California a few days ago, and his brother said there were only a handful of people on the airplane, and people are seeing that everywhere. So that is something to think about. Now, some of the other stories we're trying to get, and having a little bit of trouble here, but I will get those in a moment. Promise. Done. Even my computers, the computers, by the way, particularly Facebook, has been so slow because everybody's on it right now. So let's see. All right, let me get back to this. CBS is offering free all access during the lockdown. The finality of Star Trek, for example, the actor said you can get a free month of the streaming service in the U.S. with the code gift.via-home. Again, gift.via-home, cbsnews.com, gift.via-home. They are giving free CBS access for their streaming service. The FDA will allow doctors to treat clinically ill coronavirus patients. Now, listen to this, with blood from survivors. I don't know if this is ancient or a good practice, but they're allowing it. This is, in effect, to say that if one has the disease and they have antibodies in their blood, that you might benefit from that. Experts say the treatment might be the best hope for some patients until more sophisticated drugs are developed. And also, it's upended college admissions. A lot of people who should be going to school and signing up aren't getting there to sign up. They have to sign up online. They're missing the days that they bring in the kids and show them the college and so forth. We have now also, you've heard this again, but we're going to add to the clarion call. Hospitals across the country are trying to fill thousands of crisis nursing jobs, particularly intensive care, and emergency rooms. This according to NBC News now. So if you are a retired nurse and you're looking to make a few bucks and get back in the game, this would be the time to do it. Call your local hospital or local health department, and I'm sure that they can hook you up. And they're also saying, and this is becoming a zeitgeist now, it's okay to shout at strangers who aren't social distancing, and do it with a smile. Otherwise, you're liable to get punched in the nose. You know the way some people are. You see it in traffic every day. When you cut somebody off by accident, they want to shoot you these days. Now, Liberty University, as if the Falwell can't do enough damage with they will do anything to keep right-wing politics at the forefront, including risk people's lives. And I'm sure that's why they're doing this. But Liberty University has welcomed their students back amid the epidemic. One professor slammed the move in an op-ed saying Falwell's lack of concern does nothing to mitigate these students likely becoming vectors of the pathogen. And you just see, this is like yesterday, and Harlan Ullman and I were talking last night getting ready for today's show, and he was, as Anthony was yesterday, just ripping the Democrats who wanted to put those odd things in the bill about the Green New Deal. And now, again, playing politics. And here we have a major college in the United States predicated on weirdness, but still, Jerry Falwell's Liberty University, inviting his kids back to school to pretend that everything is okay, and probably simply to enhance and not to hurt the president's chances for re-election. The best thing the president can do to get re-elected is to handle this crisis well, Mr. Falwell. Just ridiculous. And again, so here's the story. Liberty University in Virginia welcomed students back to campus Monday amid criticism of its president, Jerry Falwell Jr. So we have a junior snippy for decision during the coronavirus pandemic. More than 1,100 students returned Monday following spring break. They were talking about being glad to be back, Falwell said in a statement published by the University News Service. I was joking about how they pretty much had the whole place to themselves. I'm just annoyed that why. I mean, it's obvious why he's doing this. The private evangelical Christian University in Lynchburg has 100,000 students. The school's website says of whom about 46,000 are undergraduates. According to U.S. News and World Report, 57% of the residential students live on campus. So the students returned on the same day. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, announced that all K-12 schools in the state will remain closed for the rest of the school year. I just don't understand, other than that, why he is doing this. But I give up. I just give up on the people on both sides who use this as an opportunity to play politics. I guess it's always been thus, but my goodness. Okay. Let me get to some of these other stories, or are we going to reopen the phone? Okay, I'm having trouble, as usual, with some of my applications. Has your phone and your computer been acting strange lately? I guess, everybody's on their computers right now, so that does it. To wear a mask or not is the next story. God, I'm done with this computer. I'm done. No, maybe I could have. Okay, let's go back. To wear a mask or not. A man wears a mask, woman wears a mask when they go out skating or walking or doing whatever it is that they do. As the number of COVID-19 cases continues to increase, you may be wondering whether you should be wearing a mask when you leave your home. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention advises unequivocal. Healthy people who do not work in health care and are not taking care of an infected person do not need to wear a mask. Face masks may be in short supply and they should be saved for caregivers. Indeed, federal officials have warned that this national strategic stockpile contains just 1% of those top-notch N95 respirators that experts predict may be needed throughout this pandemic. Many hospitals are already facing a shortage. So that is how that rolls. All righty, let's see who's on the telephone. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bob. It's Tom.
Hey, Thomas. How are you? Welcome to the program. What's on your mind today?
Well, I'm worrying about this situation because of the poor people who are on the front line in the hospitals, the
Sure.
doctors and nurses. not having the proper equipment, and they're the ones that have to take care of the people that come in that are sick. And what about even the ones that just have, non-coronavirus related medical emergencies, right? I thought about that a few times during this crisis that, everybody's lined up maybe to get. I saw a video on TV yesterday, live shot, one of the news networks, showing the emergency room with a line going out.
Oh, yeah.
Out of it.
That's what they're opening the Javits Center for. In another few days, the Javits Center and the County Center here in Westchester are going to be used for that.
You mean as walk-up emergency rooms?
As emergency rooms in regular hospitals, yeah.
I thought that was going to be where you would be designated to go to if you needed a bed.
Well, yes, but a bed or no, but I do believe, unless I'm wrong, that they also will have to treat trauma patients because it's hard to get to treat them in the regular hospitals. The regular hospitals are going to become, for the most part, COVID-19 hospitals. But again, I can get that clarified with relative ease.
Yeah,
so.
If you could, because that might make sense that if you feel you have the virus, you go to one location, but
Mm-hmm.
all other emergencies. You cut your arm, you're bleeding, you have chest pain, you maybe have a heart attack. You should go to a hospital where all the other COVID-19 patients are not going to be.
That's absolutely true, and I don't know. I think that I can't get over some of the numbers that the governor's talking about. We're talking about now in this day and age. If we just take New York, there are 5,000 ICU units. He says in 3 weeks we're going to need 50,000. That is mind-boggling to me.
Right.
Mind-boggling.
I think he's saying more, Bob. I think he says we have to prepare. At one point, it was 111,000 ventilators, and now yesterday he was talking in the ballpark of 150,000.
I turned on the wrong button. Right now, he says we need 29,000, but I have his whole speech here. I had to get every paper plus today because the problem in doing research online is you only get one story at a time. It feeds it to you linearly. You can't scan. You have to go through everything. It's like bullets in a gun. Nothing's still better than a good newspaper. Okay, let's see what he says. Official searching. Okay. New York is saying it would flood the state's trained hospitals with as many as 140,000 stricken patients in the next few weeks. Cuomo said in New York City, new cases appear to be doubling every 3 days. Wow. And the number of cases in the city neared 16,000. That means in 3 days, 32,000, then 62. It's going to grow geometrically. Your numbers are closer than mine, but minimally, he's going to need 50,000 beds. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Have you given any thought to maybe this might be biological warfare?
I have, but no, because there's no percentage in it. And in a global economy, the last people who want Americans dead are the Chinese. And there are so many other ways they can do it economically, like what Russia's doing now. We're going to be talking about it at 9 o'clock. Russia is lowering the price of oil as best they can to try and close down our fracking business. Now, that's economic war, and it's fair. And that's the capitalism. But that's what they're doing. And unless Saudi Arabia puts a stop to it. But Saudi Arabia wanted to raise the price of oil, and the Russians said, no, we won't do it. So Saudi Arabia said, okay, screw you. We got a lot more oil than you do. We're going to sell it at a cheap price and monetize it anyway. And both of them are hurting us.
Yeah.
So.
Now, yesterday I thought of another thing. Trump has come out in the past few days referring to the coronavirus as us being at war. Right?
Yes.
We're at war with the silent killer coronavirus, right?
Yes.
And here I am again playing it right down the middle, I believe. During the 2016 campaign, Obama was heavily criticized by Trump for putting, artificial deadlines on when we're going to get out of war. Remember, we're going to be withdrawn by December, right?
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, it's in the month of July. And Trump said, if you're fighting a war, how do you know when you can withdraw? How do you know when you've won? So he's declared war on coronavirus, but now all of a sudden Easter is the target date for the country to open up.
Well, you know what he's fighting, and I know we talked about this yesterday. Well, see, there are things that don't bother me because they're in the realm of politics as usual. I just don't like when politics as usual get like Jerry Falwell having people go back to college to pretend that there's no crisis. But politicians do this all the time, knowing full well that they got the other guy by the short hairs. For example, Trump himself is almost artificially pulling us out of Afghanistan because enough is enough, and he's actually being reasonably successful at it. President Obama was not, but it's impossible to pull out of these wars, and so I don't criticize either of them for wrestling with it. But you almost have to go back. Colin Powell said it best. In the Middle East, particularly, and in Afghanistan, no one, Alexander the Great, the Russians, no one has ever won a war in Afghanistan and never will. And we should have known that. We should have won in, killed the Taliban, and got the bleep out, My point being this, that you've got to look at when you get into a war, you got to have an exit strategy. I mean, we shouldn't be in Iraq 20 years later. We should have never gone in there in the first place.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Now, I heard that the Senate passed the bill, correct?
Yes, they did. Well, they're going to. The Congress has to sign it today. It's a pretty good bill. It's got $1,200 for individuals, $3,000 for families of four, money available for small businesses. I just need to see how they hand it out, and I need access to it myself, so I need to see how they're going to do that.
What we don't need at this point in time, and we've already seen it, I've heard it on the radio, is Schumer coming out and blowing the horn how the Democrat Party came through.
Well, once again, this is regular bullshit. Yeah,
please leave it alone for a month. Can you give us a month of bipartisanship, please?
No. It was the same thing when his counterpart, who does a little bit better job, I think these days, although I don't disagree with him, of saying it was a Republican bill. Stop, please, both of you, stop, behave. But Schumer's an interesting guy. He's like a guy who should be the mayor of Podunk. All of a sudden, he's a United States senator. He's actually much smarter in person, but he comes off like a hack publicly.
But Bob, he never comes up with anything, preemptive.
No.
He always runs out of the barn when the horse is gone. When is he ever going to come up with something where he's actually thinking forward?
He reads a poll first. Did you ever hear my famous joke about him? I call it famous. Air is good.
Yeah.
Air is good. We are going to fight fire, and water must be drinkable. Okay. It says that every time.
I wonder about his eyeglasses. Do the arms on those glasses, are they extra long?
Yes, that's style.
They can reach down to the tip of his nose.
That is style. My old boss at WVOX had glasses like that. It would look better on Bill O'Shaughnessy, though, than they did on Chuck Schumer. My old boss looked at least professorial. Schumer looks like he is going to just feed us a line of BS, doesn't he? Hey, listen, I got to take this next guest. Thomas, thank you for the call.
Bob, take care.
Tom from Pelham, everybody, and AJ's trying to get in. Or it could be Evar. I'm going to move. All righty. We go to the telephone. He is the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine, and I love the way he says hello. You're on the air.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Now, I've heard that now for some 6 or 7 years. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And those are the opening remarks each and every week from the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester magazine. We had the mayor of your fair city on. Again, they cover Mount Vernon better than anyone else. They cover the whole county, but Mount Vernon is their home heath. She's a busy woman. In fact, I kidded her. She could have picked a better time to become mayor. I'll tell you that.
Right. I just, we've had a couple of Facebook Live since the studio we do our radio show is closed. So I've been doing a little bit of live, and in my live when I was encouraging young people to stay in the house, and I was having like my Corona check-in with all my Facebook people.
I saw that. That's pretty cool.
Yes, she tuned in. I mean, she logged in, and I said with her there, and I said it to her when she first had the state of emergency. I applauded her for her show of leadership in reassuring the public and making the tough decisions. and it's the type of lack of lead. It's a show of leadership that we're lacking in Washington. I also applauded Cuomo as well, who have not always been a fan of Andrew Cuomo. But his show of leadership at this point, I applaud. I mean, if he was running for president, I might actually.
I
vote
know
for him.
he is. It's interesting, but a lot of people have had ambivalent feelings about the governor because, as you know, he ran center right, then he ran left, then he ran center left, then now he went all the way to the left. He's like on a rocking horse, but boy, at this time of crisis, he has absolutely shown through. I don't know if you know that they're actually broadcasting a lot of his daily briefings nationally.
Yeah, I actually, one of the last shows we had a Dr. Rabadi from Yonkers on.
Yes.
And in the beginning of the show, I played a portion of his briefing for that day, and he had said some stuff that we were talking about anyway, so it was perfect.
Absolutely, yeah. The governor's doing a fine job. How is it, if you will, on the streets of Mount Vernon? I'll give you an example. Now, you've been to this studio. I have seen now, yesterday I saw 5 people. Today I've seen 3 at one of the busiest train stations in Westchester. It is incredible. They even closed the snack bar. It's just me, the guard, and a guy that cleans up. That's it. And
wow.
And I'm in my little sanitized bubble here with the door locked. No one's allowed in, so.
Right. Well, the last couple of days, to be honest, I could not tell you because I kind of, I joke. I said I've self quarantined myself to my room, so it's like I don't really see. I haven't seen. I had to go outside on the porch the other day just to get some fresh air.
Oh. Well, I know what it's like. You're looking at news all night long and then early in the morning and trying to make sense of it. Well, as you know, I'm surrounded by windows here, so I'm getting to look out at nothing. In fact, so that people wouldn't worry too much, I turned off one of the cameras that looks outside at nothingness. It served no purpose. So
Right. Talking about beat news all night. So I wrote an editorial saying that coronavirus is further proof that we need to save and transform Mount Vernon Hospital. It was like an open letter to Governor Cuomo.
I saw that.
And I've been getting calls from certain news organizations yesterday from News 12. Michelle Brown came by and we made sure we did the 8 feet or whatever distance, but they put the mic on a mic stand and stood from a distance and asked me some questions. And I was on News 12 yesterday talking about the editorial, the importance of keeping the hospital open and you're converting buildings like the Westchester County Center and the Jacob Javits Center and 2 colleges. And you're talking about converting some hotels. We have an actual hospital that to get what you need for this area. It would cost a lot less money to take an actual hospital and put what you need, put the extra stuff you need in there, and it also then would benefit the public, the community afterwards, because the problem is when Montefiore took over, they did not provide the services that the community needed. No trauma center, no maternity ward, no cardiac unit. So people had to go to other area hospitals. And their argument for closing is nobody uses the hospital. Well, you don't have the services. You've identified that there's so many health crises in Mount Vernon, one of the biggest cities in the state, period, as far as heart concerns and diabetes and stuff like that. But you don't have anything in that hospital for the people that need it. So this is, I think it's a win-win. Convert up transform the hospital now, and then utilize it for this area because New Rochelle is already overburdened, and Yonkers
You're not
is
kidding.
Overburdened, and Bronxville is overburdened. The Bronx is overburdened. So why not take care of that now? And yes, the News 12 came by on my article.
Interesting, this, and as a newsman in general, I ask you this. I just got to tell this guy something. Bear with me. As you know, I am all literally by myself in every way, shape, or form. So I'm taking care of everything.
Well, my last 2 shows were the same way.
Yeah, I just got to send this out to remind Ivar what time he's coming on. I'm about to rejuggle things today. Okay. Well, yes. As a news guy, particularly after I read your editorial about the hospital, I've always believed that there are silver linings in every crisis. One of them, I think, is we'll never be our national, on a federal level, we'll always have enough extra respirators and be prepared for things like this again.
Right.
I think it's also uncovered the fact that, holy Christmas, we have thousands of kids that don't eat breakfast or lunch if they don't go to school. That has underscored a huge problem. And I keep saying, great, we do this. I want to know what the hell their parents are doing. Because whenever I say to someone, well, why don't we give them more food stamps? They'll say, well, they wouldn't get to the kids. Well, that's a social problem we need to look straight in the eye. But now, apropos of your editorial, maybe Mount Vernon Hospital and others like it will be saved.
And that's what I'm pushing for. That's why I wrote the open letter to I'm on the Save and Transform Mount Vernon Hospital steering committee, and I just felt like enough wasn't being said, and I had to sat back a while, letting the elected officials, the clergy, and everybody do their part, because sometimes people say, don't put, I'm working against them, by doing certain things because they're doing things behind the scenes, but I didn't see enough. So I just I got frustrated, and I saw the governor on Wednesday, March 17th, a week ago today. He said that, when this wave hits, it's going to crash the hospital system. We don't have enough hospital beds. We have a hospital here, and you're transforming all these buildings anyway. Why not put what's needed in Mount Vernon? It would be cheaper to. It would be cost effective to put what's needed in Mount Vernon Hospital, so it can be a state-of-the-art hospital, as you're converting buildings that are not even hospitals and putting everything needed in.
You have the necessary infrastructure to move oxygen to rooms and the way beds are set up, and the whole ergonomics of a hospital setting are already there. Hey, I want to lighten the load a little bit for people listening. He and I
Absolutely.
have a colleague, your partner at your newspaper, Damon Jones, an interesting guy. If he posts one more weird food thing on Facebook, I'm going to find him myself and feed him a steak.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty as well.
No, but you put stuff I might actually eat.
Because I throw some shrimp in there, in my vegetables, and
no, that's right. No, he has like giant green leaves named after things. I think he goes out in his yard and picks weeds and throws them in a pot. What's wrong with him?
Listen, but I will say, one of the issues that also we need to address in the Black community, specifically the Black community.
No.
The reason Mount Vernon has all these health issues is the things we eat.
No, I know, but I'm just having fun with it first. We'll get back to the serious part of this in a moment. No, let me just say this. I took a page out of his book. He said, you want to try this quinoa? So I bought one of these frozen deals in a bag. It was quinoa, kale, and cauliflower, right? You steam it up. It was supposedly in garlic sauce. I may as well have gone to the beach and eaten a plate of sand.
Some of those things I have to understand. Even though I'm not where he is as far as the whole plant thing.
Oh my God!
And I have another friend who's vegan, and the two of them are always working on me. But it's a taste thing. Some of the things you have to find other things. Like when I had to cut salt out of my diet, I had to find other herbs that would used to tasting things a certain way. Because some of the stuff is not tasty, so you have to find different ways. That's why I saute everything.
Well, that's it.
I find little things that I like, and I put it in there that are healthy. And it took me a minute to find certain combinations, even with all the green stuff. When I make my smoothies, I had to put a certain amount of fruit in it, like bananas and pineapples and stuff that I like.
Well, see, now there you go. Now, my daughter's husband has. I always kid that if homeless people stagger into their house, they'll walk out and say, "I'm going to take my chances in a dumpster." I mean, you open up this, you open up this guy's closet. He had seaweed wafers.
Yeah, I'm not there.
Oh my God, seaweed
a lot of people, a lot of people are giving me samples of things because they know I'm trying to change my diet, but it's like I've told my friend Brenda, I was like, I like the picture that you posted, but I'm not there yet.
No,
I
no
I'm not
kidding,
there.
no. And besides, with your appetite, whole rainforests will be missing if you just go totally
Yeah.
vegan. But now let's get back to what you said on the serious side. Now I got to remember, and I'm sure you do too, with these shows we do. People, if we keep talking about the virus every day, they're going to become one. But you mentioned something that is a more general problem, and it exists in a lot of communities. You know, I did a show about 5 years ago, although the woman was terrible at it. But did you know that in the Latino community, women have more at least then the statistics have more heart attacks than women in any other community? It has to be diet based.
Wow.
But now you're telling me in the black community there are certain issues. Talk about that.
Well, the things we eat. Going back to slavery, so in the days of slavery, you know, we ate the scraps and the things that the master would eat.
Well, that's where oxtails come from.
Oxtails, chitlins, all the different parts of the pig, that was the leftover parts. And, you know, even then, you know, after eating that, we've came up with ways to make it more delectable and tasty, and even after slavery, that became what we call soul food or whatever. And a lot of that stuff is heavy in salt and heavy in sugar, and a lot of that stuff is no good for us, and it causes the hypertension, the high blood pressure, the heart attacks, the diabetes, and all of that stuff, and the overweight. I'm guilty for a lot of that stuff, but it's just like, when you take a lot of that stuff out of your diet, you can change some of those health effects.
Of course you can. Absolutely.
And you know, when we talk about the need of Marrone Hospital, one of the things we can do that hopefully the virus is showing us a little bit, changing how we eat. You'll need the hospital less. You understand what I'm saying? So
absolutely. No, you're making sense. And, you know, in every ethnicity, we caught a break. Italians caught a break. We eat way too much pasta. And our peasant food is what it used to be called. I mean, God knows what goes in sausages. Could be rabbits in there. I don't know. But that's why they say you should never look at. And so throughout history, the same thing in the Slavic countries. And they aren't named Slavic for nothing. They were the slave peoples for many other empires. And you see all of these particular peasant dishes. But, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with them. You know Rock and Raymond over here in New Rochelle? It's owned by two African Americans who really have wonderful business. And the reason I mention that is one of their specialties is oxtail. And we got into the whole history of oxtail. And they say it's actually pretty good. I've never eaten an oxtail.
Oxtail is delicious.
Yeah.
I try not to eat too much of it anymore. I used to eat a lot of it. Oxtail is very delicious.
Yeah, I'm going to have to eat the tail of an ox, I guess. I mean, it's just, everybody keeps talking about it, and they come in here once a week and we kid around. They're just great personalities. We have them on not just for business, but because they're fun. But they tell me about all their dishes, and they were going to have a big special for Easter, a big oxtail special, so.
Can I I just want to.
Sure.
You said this, and I don't know how many people in your community are listening, but I want to give a shout out. I did on my Facebook page. There's a restaurant in
any restaurant
called Sugar Plums.
Yes, I know it well.
Yes, now she was, you know, I talked to her well. I know her family. She knows my family. And it was like they weren't getting supported by the community, and their doors were closed for a little while. Well, even though they're struggling, they're preparing meals for the seniors, and they're serving the seniors, and they're doing all this stuff. And they had like a little GoFundMe thing, and not that I had extra money, but I even donated. But I think we need to support our local businesses, especially more than ever, especially now with this being sequestered to the house right now. All the businesses are hurting, and we definitely need to support businesses that support our community.
Absolutely. Apropos of that, now I put out the word, and the problem is I can't get a hold of owners because the owners aren't there. But any restaurant who will give me, I'll write it for them. Mount Vernon, Eastchester, anywhere in the community, in New Rochelle. If they email me at bob@radiowestchester.com, I will give them, just like you just did, I will give them a free plug. to say that they're open for business.
I do know her. I will tell her to hit you, to email you.
Yeah, or you can give her you can give her my personal cell number, and
Okay,
I want to
do
help
that.
these businesses. So one more time, tell us what Sugar Plum is doing. Go ahead, feel free to do that.
Sugar Plum is on North Avenue. It's a soul food place, and like I said, they was feeding the seniors, doing a lot of stuff to feed the seniors, preparing meals for the seniors, and for free, taking care. And I don't know if they're being delivered or what. I don't remember all that part, but I just was so moved when I know her personally. But I was just moved that, like, even though at some point she felt that she was going to close because her community didn't support her, she is still supporting her community. Most people be like, my community don't support me. I ain't going to do that for my community. But she is supporting the community, and I thought that was very powerful, and I posted it on my Facebook page.
Absolutely. Any restaurants that's delivering food for people or that call us up and you can still pick it up, I will give them a free plug. And one even, they're going to advertise with us, but they may not even have the money now, but I'm plugging them anyway just for the intent. I talk about the folks over at Beachmont. My favorite restaurant, as you know, happens to be Modern. I talk about it, but I can't get a hold of the owner because he's not in. But I want to get lines for each of these places, and I will give them a free plug. Hopefully they'll remember me at the end of this. But they are available. You can pick up food there. Or some of them are doing a Sugar Plum here in New Rochelle is doing. That's a public service that we have to do for one another. We absolutely need to do that.
And I've been doing that on my Facebook page. I've been doing that on social media. When I find one or two that are doing something like that, I definitely plug them. And then, I know her personally, but I've been doing that with people I don't know.
That's a great name, Sugar Plum. I like that.
Sugar Plum, yeah, it's with 2 G's.
8:38. We're talking with the editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine, A.J. Woodson. What's the mood in your city? Now, I know you've sort of been in lockdown for the last couple of days, eating your vegetables. And looking at Damon's Facebook page with giant leaves in it. It's killing me with this stuff. He had something the other day. It looked like a rug of green. I have no idea what it was. I just clicked right off it. But what's the mood in your town and our kids? I don't even see kids when I drive through Mount Vernon or the West End of New Rochelle. I don't even see them playing baskets or running in the parks. It's like empty. It's a ghost town.
I think a lot of people, and not just in Mount Vernon, but a lot of people that I've talked to, they're developing cabin fever right now.
Yep.
And then I've been having conversations on, that's one of the things I talked about on my Facebook Live, was, creative things you can do to spend time with your family right now. I mean, even Cuomo mentioned that his daughter's home from college, and he'll get this month to spend that he normally wouldn't have with his daughter right now, and he's appreciative of that. We need to. I know. You used to being at work and the kids at school and everything. Now you're all stuck in the house, and I know that can be frustrating, but it can also be a blessing. Taking time to have some real quality time with your family, and the older people need to get to the younger people and, show them some stuff we used to do, like playing board games and stuff in the house.
Oh, God, yeah.
All kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of fun things you can have and do right now.
And there are newer games, It's some of the fact. I got to get my grandson on. I can't get him on today, tomorrow. He's 17. He's like a young man now. But believe it or not, here is a millennial who loves the new, the new type of, they're not so much board games as everybody writes it like you mentioned something like ducks or I don't know, a word, and then you have to come up with ways. And,
yes, those are fun.
Those are all fun games.
But there's even a newer version of Monopoly where instead of having the money, you have like a debit card or something, and you put it in the machine, and you put it in the thing, and it takes the money out or puts the money in. And,
I have a confession to make. Do you know what I've always thought was okay in Monopoly if I could get away with it? Stealing. Because it exists in society. So if I get my mitts in the bank and throw a couple of 500 silver notes there, and I don't know, I'm not a good real estate person. In real life, I've proved it, but I always wind up with those what are the two little things that are worth nothing? They're $60. God.
Boardwalk and Park Place.
Yeah, I always wind up with those. It's amazing.
And you hit those just before you hit go.
Yeah, and I'm always in jail. And see, I like the bargains, but then at the end of the game, I have a lot of money because I've been robbing everybody. do not go to the bathroom when you're playing Monopoly with me. Cards is a lot of people, cards got too serious for some, but poker with just chips and stuff like that or nickels is an awful lot of fun.
Right, but those games, those guessing games like you're talking about, there's a lot of different variations of those.
Yeah, I forget what they're called, Pictionary or whatever they are. I don't know what they.
Yeah, it's like you have to say there's lots of variations where you have to say a word or you have to describe a word or you have to give a clue or something and then people have to guess it.
Right.
There's so many variations of those. I play those with my sister still. Like when I go down to her house to get away. Yeah, we play some of those games.
It's a fun game. I think you do. I think you should know him. Do you know Jovan Richards? He's been on the radio with me a lot.
Yes,
He's a Democratic guy. Well, he's a good friend of mine, and we play cards with some other friends of ours. And he plays this game. I can't even say. I can say it on the air, but I'll say Bull Spit. You ever play that card game?
Yes.
And it is hysterical.
Not in decades, but yes.
It is hysterical. And you got to see us. It's a bunch of people that play from my old radio station. One guy can't see. He got Braille cards. Jovan is a good card player. I'm the worst because I if I have to dance on the table if I win.
Right,
and we have a ball playing that game. It's just,
Jovan, I think is one of his screen names on social media is like the Prince of 914.
Oh yeah, the Prince of West. He's had all these handles. The Prince of Westchester. Now, of course, he's a Democratic operative. He was here on Super Tuesday, and he interned under me 10, 15 years ago at WVOX, and now, of course,
I still see him up there sometimes when we're doing the show. He'll be in the booth with the person in the booth every now and then.
Well, he used to be. Well, he's gone from there now, and he's going to be doing some shows here with us too. But again, he's very busy working for candidates.
I see him because I have a lot of the candidates on my show. So I've gone to their functions and I've seen him at a few of them. So
yeah, he's a great. He threw me under the bus once. He was still in high school at the time. And Jovan, I hope he's listening because he'll be calling me and yelling at me. He's still in high school, and he was president of this club, and he had to give a speech about what his internship was. So I'm in there with teachers and about maybe 50 kids, and he invited me to give a small talk. But first he opened it up, and he's real serious, and he gets in front of the group, and he says, the most important thing if you're engineering and producing the Bob Marrone morning show. And I'm looking, is he going to talk about the news gathering? Is he going to talk about setting up the board properly electronically? And he shows a picture of the talk show host, Robin Bede, from Headline News. And it's true. I used to make, because I had like a thing for her, If you don't put this news on, you have failed in your job because Bob needs to look at Robin Bede before he can speak. He tells it the whole school this. Jovan, God. But it was absolutely true. Jovan, I don't see it on yet, Jovan. Where's my girl? Put her on.
Well, that was good for you because you get at me and everybody else.
Oh, I get at everybody, yeah.
I've heard the sports guy, you always beating him up all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I like to beat up. And Vince now I beat up regularly. And, I've only just begun. I've sort of been unplugged in my new locale. But see,
Isn't it refreshing? And that's what people don't understand. Like when we first started our show, it was internet-based, so you don't have the FCC, so you don't have the limitations of certain things. So when you want to be a little more expressive, you can.
Yes.
But you can do what you want to do, and you can do what you couldn't do under other companies.
A lot of people will expect me to, people always think you're going to trash where you used to work, but I don't. I'll always love WVOX for giving me my start and for hiring me all those years. And I must say, I never, ever was told. Now, occasionally I pissed off my boss, but I never was told what to say. Only once I didn't know, but yet we had, and it's their right, as they're paying the bills. We had certain, we had to keep it like 80, 90% local. Long form interviews you didn't do, and my editorials had to be kept to a minimum, which was their right. That's not a complaint, but I'm freed from that here. Yes, but I can tell you the one time I talked off my boss was actually a funny story, and it's a story I love to tell. In fact, he just passed away, so with all deference to Jack Welch, but I didn't know my boss was a friend of his. Anyway, I it was when, do you remember the beautiful blonde who died? Anna Nicole Smith.
Yes.
Remember, she married an 85-year-old guy, and
Right.
she was white trash kind of. That's why she was depicted. God bless her soul. She's passed now, but and so keep that in mind. She had just died, so I was taking calls about that and how sad it was, and blah blah blah. And so I said, but who's more? And I can even ask this of you now. Who is more of a lowlife? Anna Nicole Smith, who came from a tough environment, using her looks to marry an 85-year-old man and get his money, or Anna Nicole that's what I still call her, or Susie Wettlaufer. Susie Wettlaufer was, now you're in the business, so you'll know how esteemed her job was. She was the publisher of the Harvard Business Review, the editor-in-chief, the most august business magazine in the most prestigious university, maybe with some deference to Oxford, in the world, Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. She finally scores an interview with Jack Welch. She beds him that night, and takes him from his wife. Who is the bigger? Who are you going to blame? So I called her Anna Nicole Wettlaufer, and so and again, I mean no disrespect now. This happened years ago, but still. So I think it was Lorraine Carl called up, and she says it was a regular caller still, and she called up and says, "Bob, maybe Jack Welch is a handsome man." I said, "Have you ever seen him? He looks like the bird that the cat drops off when he's in front of the door in the morning." So
wow.
I didn't know he was my boss's friend. And he said, "Bob, how did..." But he never, and look, you're not supposed to promote another radio station, but I got to. He never told me, like anything else, I have my disagreements with my bosses, but never told me what to say on the air. Occasionally got pissed at what I said, but never told me what to say.
We've only, and all the times I've guested on other people's shows, and we have our own show once a month. The only time they've actually told me, "Oh, you can't say that," we called Joe Spezio a confessed federal informant, and they were like, "Whoa, you can't say that." They said at the commercial, and I gave him the proof that we had that he was. He's, "Oh, okay." Well, you got
you got to be careful for libel. I mean, I still worry about. I'm very careful about libel here too, and I'm sure you get this too. One of the things we get, folks, in this business, one guy in particular would come into WVOX or here now, and say to me, "Listen, this is going on, and something needs to be done about it." And I'll say, "All right, who said it?" No, so-and-so. Okay, I'm going to call. "No, you can't." I said, "Well, you're giving it to me on background." "No, you got to go with it." No, you're giving it to me on background. Unless I can verify it, I'm not going with the story, because everybody's got a pet peeve, and they get angry not realizing that you've got to check out a story before you go with it. I was very careful to go with, and I totally trusted the guy that gave me the story, with the when I found out that United Hebrew may have had a case. But I checked it out first, even though I trust the guy who told me with my life, but I wanted to be able to say that, yes, I checked the second source, because you're talking about and full disclosure, they're a sponsor of mine, but I wanted to be sure. You got it. They don't realize that we have that kind of rigor we have to go by.
My thing is not even libel. My thing is credibility.
Well, me too. Yes, absolutely.
And because what we do, and some people don't take us seriously, so it's just like I have to, make sure I double and triple my facts.
Yeah, you have to.
Things. And I got to put the documents in the article and everything so people can read it for themselves. And we try to err on the side of caution on that level.
Yes,
it's because of credibility. Because so many people try to say, "Oh, they're fake news," and this, that, and the other, and question our credibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, I do use a lot more of now. I mean, I use it on all my shows. I love humor. I love irony. I love to break chops. Like, have you ever heard Melissa Lonkeesh, who before she got very busy with her schooling, but I still one day hope, she's an educator, that one day she'll have a little more free time and have her come in the morning show. She insults the living daylights out of me, and I torture her, and it's wonderful radio. So, hey, listen, that beep moons. I got to go to the next guest. Thank you so much, folks. Read Black Westchester magazine, especially if you want to know what's going on in Mount Vernon and the county. Good morning, morning means that you're about to hear from A.J. Woodson, their editor-in-chief. Thank you very much.
BlackWestchester.com.
All right,
Yes.
thank you so much. All righty, folks, we're going to go to our next guest. And for this hour, we don't even need to reset the weather. We'll do it at the end of it before we get to Harlan Ullman. Now, my next guest is District 4. He is the councilman from District 4 here in New Rochelle. Please welcome Ivar Hayden. Good morning, councilman.
Hey, good morning, Bob. How you doing?
I hate you. You have such a wonderful voice on there. Even on the radio, it comes through. I don't work at this stuff. God give you the gift. I hate it. That's why Lou. I always wanted to be Lou Rawls. You'll never find. Anyway, all right.
Oh yeah, I gotcha. Yeah.
Or more
Good
Frank.
stuff.
And I was 21. I can't do that either. Anyway, Ivar, welcome to the program. I got to tell you now, we're down to today. Yesterday, I counted 5 people in the 5 or 6 hours I was here. Today, I've counted 3, and one of them was the cleaning guy. And you know where the station is. You come in person when we were talking.
Of course.
Totally
Well,
dead.
I think that's indicative. I know a couple of people have told me that. Well, not this week, but certainly, I guess early this week they rode the trains into the city, and there's no one on the train, and there's no one inside of Grand Central. 1 or 2 people wandering around.
Yeah, we even closed the snack bar here. I had to go elsewhere today to get a coffee and to get some of the newspapers I use. In fact, for this, if I may just share a beef with you, it's not about you, but as someone who does the news, I'm sorry, you still can't beat a full newspaper. The world's going to learn that because the way the web feeds you stories, they're too linear. You can't get the whole meal. It's like, imagine if you sat down to dinner and you were getting a 5-course meal and you only, here's the meat, here's the veggies.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree with you, but I think that's part of what's wrong with our society now, too, is that nobody has any patience for anything. So it's all about the headline. Nobody drills down even 1 or 2 levels, right, to actually try to learn about something, and I think that's part of why everything gets so polarized so quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And, people are just not intellectually curious about any of this, about anything. You pick a tribe and then you just listen to the nonsense. And,
absolutely.
So, that's a big issue. And, even if newspapers were able somehow to come back, I don't think people would read them anymore. I just don't think they're used to that.
Well, I'm going down with that ship. You give me the 4 biggies: the Post, the News. Even though they all have their own little twists, the Post has the best sports on the planet, not just. But the sports, the News, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and I'm happy as a pig in slop. It just.
No, I understand.
You just
there's some great people writing for all of those papers,
and you've covered all the political spectrum. You get the whole feel for the zeitgeist. Speaking of, let's talk about New Rochelle. It's wonderful that we're no longer the top COVID story, the top virus
we were
story.
Early on, and that's in a way that was a negative for us, obviously, but in a way it was a positive because we were able to get the attention and services from the state and county right away. I think George Latimer and Governor Cuomo did a great job, and we set up the confinement area, which of course now is everywhere, basically in New York State, and it worked from what we can tell. I mean, the latest numbers that I've seen show a definite slowing of the number of new cases in New Rochelle. So this is very encouraging. I think people should feel encouraged by the fact that we're doing the right thing. We're maintaining the proper conduct in terms of social etiquette and hand washing and being careful and all that kind of stuff, and it seems to be working. So that's very encouraging for New Rochelle. I'm I'm concerned about the city. It's a whole different situation in New York, and I can understand why nobody wants to ride the trains in and out of New York.
And you know what else too? We had, and it's because I went to it. I saw it. I observed it with my own eyes. We had the absolute, and it's always arguable because everybody's setting them up now. We had the best drive-through and the way it was run testing center that you could even imagine over in the park. Just amazing.
Glen Island. Yeah.
Just amazing how well run it was. Kudos to the state and county and local authorities for the way it was run. Now, I know the council a lot. We had the mayor on the other day. We had the city manager on. And we understand that things are pretty quiet at City Hall. How has the council been involved? How are you all getting updated in terms of what's going on?
Well, we're still getting updates pretty much daily from both the city manager and the mayor on any issues that come up. We'll be doing our city council meetings and other meetings the same way I think we did the last one. I mean, those who want to attend personally can, and anyone else can do it telephonically or whatever they call it. And we're doing that this afternoon. I have the IDA board would meet tonight normally. We're doing it all by telephone this afternoon instead. It's important that we distance, ourselves from even given the situation. Thank goodness no one I know in any of these public boards or whatever has been tested positive with this very nasty virus. But we should still maintain caution, and we can still do our business the way things are. The city has hired a new coordinator for a lot of our community outreach programs.
Is that right?
She started on Monday.
What does she do? Who does she work for?
She works for the indirectly. She works for us. She works for Volunteer New York, and we've hired her through Volunteer New York, but she's full time in New Rochelle. Has a very impressive resume, and basically is going to be a manager to coordinate all of these.
But what's she going to coordinate? Let's get her on the air. Let's get her on the air. What is she going to do? That's why I'm asking.
Well, we'll speak to her. I hope to speak to her later today or on Friday, and I will certainly mention that.
Give her my phone number.
We have a lot of things that are going on here. I mean, obviously, there's the school district is doing a lot of food distribution, but we also have other entities that are doing food distribution. We have people who are lots and lots, by the way, of community volunteers who are wonderful, who are out there trying to help people who need food, seniors that need food, that need care, homeless people, all of this kind of stuff. We've had an amazing outreach from all kinds of people.
Yes.
The thing that it needs is some kind of management. It needs coordination, because in some cases, the not-for-profits and the school district and all these different organizations with the churches and whatever kind of it's not directed efficiently.
No, it was overlapping, and Bob Cox pointed out the other day on this air that with all the best of intentions, they were inadvertently violating the very notion of social distancing, which has been fixed. But please, I want to give, if she has to make daily announcements, we'll put her on. We will do anything that we can to help. I will certainly
tell her that when I speak with her. I have not yet met her. And I think that, I think it was a good idea. I mean, we realized that, Chuck and our city manager and mayor at this point are both overwhelmed. And we need somebody who can basically manage all of this stuff and just do that.
And we'll be her voice box. We'll let her shout out every day. And good for the city. That's wonderful to hear. Again, my guest, Ivar Hayden, he is city councilman from District 4 here in New Rochelle. How are you doing being shuttered in? Has your wife killed you yet?
No, I mean, she still might. It's entirely possible. But,
it's still early.
It's still early. No, she's wonderful and very patient. And, I've still been going over to my business, which is officially closed. So I still have some work to do over there, and I'm maintaining a positive outlook for the future, so doing a little bit of renovation over there and organizing things and doing things that I never had the time to do. Of course, I'm very concerned about all small business in New Rochelle.
Yeah,
by the way, all of us are really struggling.
We're going to die.
Survive for a month or so, but after that, it's I think extremely.
We're sinking by the head. It's like the Titanic. We should all start singing "Nearer, My God, to Thee" as we slide into the water. Well, I
understand this bill will pass. I understand today.
Yes, it's a done deal.
And I haven't seen the details of the small business provisions. It sounds like there's some stuff in there, whether or not it will be enough and be able that small business will be able to get their hands on this money quickly. That's
Well,
that's
isn't it true?
going to be something that we have to see.
I think all of us have a number in our head that we would need to get us through this crisis, and hopefully there will be loans or interest-free loans or grants to help us do that. But
Well,
by the way,
I would hope that there would be grants and interest-free loans for a lot of mom and pops because, loans, even though loans would be wonderful for the short term, a lot of small business, doesn't need to add additional debt that they then have to pay back.
I know, but we got to do something.
Given the situation, that it's going to be a long time before the economy comes back. So, I would hope that there would be at least a long-term financing grants or very, or no interest.
Right, or very long-term payback. I agree with you, so you can fit it in. I'd say in my case, I'm just, I'm going to go sell my wares. I'll be a PA announcer at a high school. Class 7B is now meeting in the conference room.
So I was going to ask you, how are you doing without sports? I mean, how are you surviving without sports?
Well, fine. You know me. It's one of only my 3 big hobbies, hockey. It's
right.
I love airplanes, and I love my books, and I'm reading a lot and watching movies. But you know what? Like you, I'm turning it to work. I mean, I'm living here in this. I sanitize the whole studio. The door's locked. No one comes in. I'm a one-man show. I'm doing everything now. And I'm safe because I'm the only person here. I don't interact with anyone. I'm like in the gas chamber of radio. So,
no, I think something that's not bad. That's good.
It is. It has been good. And I'm still getting I snuck over to Flowers Park. They close it sort of officially, but because nobody's there to keep my legs in shape, I throw on the old roller blades and I skate over by the on the basketball court, which is a nice flat
surface.
Surface.
Great. That's good. So. Terrific. Good.
So if you see a hockey player zooming around Flowers Park, it's probably me.
I've got to say there've been people every day in Library Green. Some people running around the circle, some people just kind of hanging out a little bit. We had a nice day the other day. It was good to see people out and about. So that's hopeful.
Well, it is.
We're going to get through this one way or another. It's going to end at some point. I just hope for the best in terms of New York City now is.
You know what, my friend? It always does.
Situation.
It always does. We always get through this. So, well, thank you very much. And I will talk to you again next week. Ivar Heiden, it is always a pleasure. Please stay well and stay sane.
Bob. You too.
Ivar Heiden, District Council, District 4 City Council here in New Rochelle. Going to take a break at Harlan Ullman on the line, and we'll be right back with the weather. All righty, we're headed for our 9 o'clock special guest. Actually, the official time is 9:05, 1 minute from now. I'm Bob Marrone. This is Mornings with Bob Marrone, and this is Radio Westchester, your radio station at the train station. And today, the head count walking by in one of the busiest train stations here, 3. And as you know, we're surrounded in this little bubble. So, there goes the 4th right now with a mask on and God knows what else. All righty, let's take a look at the weather. And the weather's brought to you exclusively by United Hebrew of New Rochelle, voted one of America's best rehabilitation and senior care campuses. It's right in New Rochelle. Visit uhdc.org. Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn and Dominic's. Fine Cigars will bring you this hour. Now, it's mostly cloudy, 41. We might have a few light showers later, getting down to 45. And tonight, getting up to 45, I should say. Tonight, partly cloudy, getting down to 37. Thursday, mostly sunny, nice day, getting up near 60, 55 to 60. And then some more sprinkles, morning showers on Friday. And we'll have increasing sunshine. And it's time for one of our favorite guests. You know him. He's internationally renowned as a national security expert, a military expert, understands the planet from a geopolitical and, of course, geoeconomic point of view. He teaches at war colleges. He has a column for UPI. Just been writing great stuff lately. He's written several books. He started a new one. His most recent book, though, Anatomy of Failure, How America Loses the Wars It Starts. He's been a destroyer commander, swift boat commander in Vietnam, and he's a go-to person on a global scale. Knows generals and foreign ministers on a first-name basis. And I've probably said too much, or I'll never get to him. Please welcome, without further ado, Harlan Ullman. Good morning, Harlan.
Good morning, Robert.
We live in interesting times, to say the least. And I had all the papers sitting in front of me here, and everyone's talking about the new economic stimulus. A, how do you think it will affect things? B, the president's been a little more calculating, but saying maybe Easter he could open up the economy. And I'm going to call him a knucklehead. The knucklehead that runs Liberty College started to take students back in already. What the heck? Speak to us.
Well, this package is just the beginning. My guess is we're going to need at least $5 or $6 trillion. Obviously, nobody can predict with any kind of certainty how this disease is going to unfold. But I think it's fair to say that if you took the vast majority, and I would say 99% of the competent medical authority and advice, this is going to be far, far worse before it gets better. How long, we don't know, 4 to 6 months possibly, but I think that's the assumption that needs to be the basis for planning. And so the economy can be kept going in the interim. At some stage, obviously, things will turn around, but it's the uncertainty that counts. And what the administration really needs, and it doesn't seem to have come forth yet, with an overall plan. I mean, first of all, what is the plan for producing all the necessary protective equipment? Yeah, you're going to have General Motors or 3M begin to turn out masks, and 3D printers may be turning out respirators. But where is the plan? Where can the average American take a look and see where these things are being done? Second, similarly, what is the state of research on some sort of palliative that at least will limit the damage that the disease can do to individuals, the medications that could be helpful? We need to have an idea so that Americans can be reassured that this is a maximum effort. I'm sure that a maximum effort is being made, but communications at this particular time are really essential. And then now that the first plan is about to be approved in terms of economic stimulus by Congress, all right, what's the Secretary of the Treasury doing talking about follow-on plans, the various contingencies, supposing this does not get better by Easter as the president wishes, supposing it stays on and lingers for rather a long time? What are the plans that will be in place to deal with that? It's not so much the plans themselves, but it's the planning process that becomes comprehensive and takes on all these issues. But it also gives great confidence to the American public that its government is doing what needs to be done, not just reacting on an immediate basis to the many crises at hand, but somebody is doing some long-range thinking. That, I think, is essential. I've urged both here and in the UK to undertake that sort of approach. I hope that we do it sooner rather than later, but we need to build up confidence that there is an end game in play, and that end game is flexible enough to deal with an extended period while this crisis continues and while the disease continues to infect more Americans.
Why do you think we don't have it? And I know it's easy pickings, frankly, to just go after the president, but he also has people working for him. Where does this need to come from? The Health and Human Services, the White House? Where does it have to come from? From Homeland Security? Where do you see it coming from?
One of the things in my column today, Bob, that I argued, I compare Pearl Harbor to today in terms of the suddenness of the surprise attack that launched us into World War II. And obviously the differences are huge. On December 8th, Americans could do something. They could join the military. They could buy war bonds. They could grow victory gardens. There were actual tangible things that could be done. Today, what are you going to do? Stay home. It's not quite as exciting. But recall that after Pearl Harbor, Prime Minister Winston Churchill took a long and risky flight to come over and spend nearly a month in the United States, most of which was spent with Franklin Roosevelt devising a strategy. And so the first thing we need is to have a strategy, and we have to do it on a multilateral basis, no matter how much the president may dislike that term. There needs to be a virtual meeting that could take days between the Group of 20, the Group of 77, NATO, EU, the participants are pretty obvious. It can't be done through the UN, which is too ponderous, or the World Health Organization, which is too politicized. And we have to have a global plan to react, because if you are able to stave off disease in one part of the world, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be able to apply to the rest, and the disease could come back. So first, in the White House, it has to go beyond just the coronavirus task force. There has to be a comprehensive plan that lays out along these 6 or 7 lines of attack, from protective equipment to economic rejuvenation to what comes next, a plan of action that has several parts to it depending upon the length of how long this persists. And then second, there has to be some kind of a global organizational meeting to see how together the major countries in the world can act responsibly so that the economies are kept going and that the disease is beaten back. And finally, there needs to be coherent research and exchange among the various laboratories, universities, and medical institutions who are working on cures as well as on vaccines. This has got to be done globally, because if it is not, we're going to lose the ability to have resources that are beyond our own capacity, and that applies to every country. And that, as I said, we need a whole of Earth approach to resolve this and to make sure it does not come back.
You know, Harlan Ullman, as I listen to you, I think back to my own corporate days where we had people gifted at putting plans together. And we would do it like after the bombing of the First World Trade Center. We put together contingency plans that are, quite frankly, it's just an exercise in reverse engineering and then planning ahead on what if you don't have this, what if you don't have that. There are experts on this planet great at this. Why is this not happening? Now, I realize on a global scale, one nation would have to take the lead and you'd have to foster cooperation, and there's a great deal of diplomacy involved. But in terms of putting a plan together, even in the abstract, it's quite frankly doable. Complex, yes, but doable. Why is it not happening?
Of course. And sometimes governments are slow to react. There's no Churchill to talk to FDR. My sense is, because the president is operating under the assumption that this is going to be over in 2 or 3 weeks, that long-range planning is not going to be needed. I mean, you have a complete conflict here between medical experts and the President of the United States. And yesterday at his multi-press conferences, when he said, well, 37,000 Americans die of the flu each year,
yes.
In essence, let's not get too excited. Why did nobody ask the question, well, Mr. President, if you look at some of the estimates, say from the Imperial College in London, that maybe 2 or 3 million Americans can die because of this year, what is your response? What is your responsibility for this? And, of course, Trump says, well, I don't believe those estimates. They're not going to happen. And then, of course, when the follow-up question is, but suppose they do, the answer is, well, I'm not going to look at hypotheticals. But somebody has got to confront the president and say, look, Mr. President, in the worst case, it's possible that hundreds of thousands, and even potentially 1 million or 2 million Americans could die from this. Think about that would do to your re-election chances in November, to put it quite bluntly. The fact that you can be, quite hardened and say, well, 37,000 Americans die each year of flu, plus or minus, and how many people die in car crashes and because of gunshot wounds? Sure. And people are dying of cancer and all other sorts of things on a regular basis. But given the fact that the disease is so infectious, we really don't know what its mortality rate is. In Germany, the mortality rate seems to be less than 0.5%.
Mm-hmm.
But that could well be because they're doing more testing than we are. Because the tests have been so late, it's very difficult to know if we had been able to test 2 million Americans or 3 million Americans, what the mortality rate really might be. So there are huge numbers of uncertainties here, and as I said, we're playing catch-up because we waited too long to get a lot of these things in train, and we can only hope that self-quarantining will have an impact, even though it is going to be very, very detrimental for the economy. You've got two critical issues, Bob. The first is that the health issue, which is probably the most important. And if the disease is as infectious as it appears to be in New York, that has got to be the first priority. Secondly, obviously you can't destroy the economy, but if you bring people back to work too early, you're just going to compound the problems with the disease. Now, this is an agonizing choice. There's no right answer. In retrospect, you can always second-guess yourself. But I think it's got to be public health as the first priority, and then through these different measures from Congress, hope that that will sustain the economy long enough until the disease finally abates. Because if you bring people back to work too early and the disease then explodes in terms of infection rates, you've just exacerbated the situation. And my concern is that the president looks much more towards the economy right now, and the expectation is that he doesn't want to drive it into the ditch, which is a fair approach.
Understood, but a couple of questions for you. As I listen to you and as I go through all my show prep day before, morning of the show, one of the things that is obvious, that there is a segment, and I'm not saying it includes the president, that views this as, hey, people die every day. They die from things every day. 80, 90% of us are going to be fine. Why upset the apple cart? And history tells us that people have died before from flus and pandemics and wars and holocausts and everything else, and we go on. There seems to be sometimes a tendency among those in power to view these things in the abstract and not realize the human cost. Which is to say that, like down in Liberty University, there are people that just view this, and I'm wondering in today's world, how many people in government just view this as a PR problem?
Well, I'm sure some do, quite understandably. I mean, you probably have some percent of the population who believe that this is going to go away if we just let it, and what's the real problem here?
Just let it kill who it's going to kill and move on. There are people, I'm being very blunt here, I don't agree with that, but there are some people that absolutely feel that way. And if the president's banking on them, well, what does that tell us?
Well, crisis will do two things. One, it will bring the very best to the top, and it will exacerbate differences so that those who are on the fringe will probably become even more radical. And that's the problem right here. You're going to have some percentage, Liberty University reflects, I suspect that, of people who say, look, God is going to protect me, or I've got a magic amulet or something like that that's going to protect me. And in any event, the chances of getting this thing are low, and even if I do get it, I'm going to be okay, and go on about their business. And unfortunately, if it turns out that the experts are correct, and this is as infectious as it appears, those people will be doing a disservice not only to themselves but to the rest of the public. But in any society, you have a certain percentage of people who are in that category. What's really interesting is that if you look around the world, it's really extraordinary that China seems to have emerged the way it has. And so I'm very, very suspect as to the data from China. I really don't believe that things are quite as well in China, even though I have no evidence, since it's very difficult to get evidence out of that country. But little Estonia in the Baltics, even though it has a relatively high rate of infection, it's probably the only country in the world that's entirely digitized. 99% of the Estonians have the internet. Everything is done on a cell phone. Banking, buying, it doesn't make any difference. So people can stay at home, even though there are only 1.5 million Estonians, and basically conduct their lives off their cell phones and off the internet. So they're far better prepared. And so one lesson I think that we need to take away from this is that we have to become a much more digital society in the future that will enable us to be able to take advantage of that technology in the event some future crises forces a major change in our social lives and how we live our lives.
Well, I wanted to get to that, Harlan Ullman. You're probably one of the best qualified people that we could get in this country to answer this. Your specialty, national security, involves many things, from diplomacy to understanding cultures to the military and economics. Let's, as you suspect, not that it will happen, but let's say it takes as much as $6 trillion in stimulus.
Yeah.
What is that going to do to it puts money in people's pockets, but it probably devalues money a little bit with all that currency out there. What does that do to our infrastructure and our national security? And then how do we recover from that? And how does it square us with the rest of the world then?
Well, there are several things. First, we have to have a national infrastructure plan. And that's it. This is going to be like the public works of and the Roosevelt years, when people were put to work to do things. We have to do that, and we're just going to have to absorb the amount of debt and deficit that costs us. But there's opportunity. Our roads go back to 1954. Our electrical power grid, which was regarded as unbelievably vulnerable in 1980, needs an upgrade. We need to revamp our whole internet connections with 5G. Obviously, this will be a lesson in terms of public health and what we need to do to modernize our public health system. So there are 5 or 6 or 7 areas here where we could spend $3 or $4 trillion, put people to work, but also build up an infrastructure that, when it is completed, it will make this country economically viable for a very long time. This is what Eisenhower's National Defense and Highway Act did in 1954. It connected the country. It was an engine of growth. So there are opportunities here if people are forward-looking. But having said that, the same problems you just cited with people represented by Liberty University who are just going to go back to work, we see on the Congress. I think it is, in a sense, understandable why some fringe on the Congress, for example, want to get the Green New Deal as part of the stimulus package. And I can understand if you believe that climate change is the greatest threat that we face, and it may well be, I can understand that. But you have to have priorities. And where the Green New Deal or parts of it for the environmental side would take place with the infrastructure side. So my point is the first priority is dealing with people. That's not the Green New Deal. That's providing money for people. That's providing assistance and support loans for businesses, making sure the economy does not collapse. And that has to be done ruthlessly, and there can be no exceptions. If your idea does not fit that description, get at the end of the line and wait till we come back on further bills. That's what we have to do. And I think Mitch McConnell is trying to do that, but there needs to be a statement. This is the first priority. And if you're not part of that priority, you're going to have to wait. Your time will come. I think, as I said, later this fall, later this spring, early summer, we need an infrastructure bill. That's the time you can fight all these things out. So I'm concerned that there are small numbers of people on the Hill who see their own priorities as the first priorities and not necessarily the priorities of what should be.
Absolutely. What did you think of that lieutenant governor that in effect said, old people die all the time. We who are grandparents have to be willing to sacrifice so that the economy doesn't collapse. That was incredible stuff.
Well, I wouldn't vote for him.
Well, he's a lieutenant governor anyway. I don't know if that's an elected position in his place. Now, in his state, let's take a look at the fallout in terms of national security and how this is affecting other countries. And again, we hear very little from Moscow about this. And as you said the other day, today, India, whole 1.3 billion people locked down. We've got other countries, though, acting like nothing's wrong, don't care who dies, and still fighting wars. What about the impact on the planet from the state of national security? What should we be worried about?
Well, one of the things I actually have suggested to the Pentagon that our regional commanders, our combatant commanders, Central Command, Pacific Command, Atlantic Command, African Command, South American, Southern Command, need to be looking beyond the day-to-day issues of what happens when servicemen are infected. How do you have the logistics to support them? For example, in the Persian Gulf, look at Iran. Iran apparently has a huge infection rate. Now, that is a huge national security problem potentially because you could see a revolution, you could see riots, you could see pandemonium, and how that spills over is of real interest. In India and Pakistan, Pakistan will be, I think, as infected as India potentially, and I'm sure that you have people in ISI, which is the CIA of the Pakistanis, and RAW, Research and Warning, which is the CIA of India, obviously plotting. I would not be surprised if they were sending infected people across the border just to make life difficult elsewhere. Similarly, in China, what's really happening in China? Now, the issue here is when you have some kind of implosion in a country. Syria is now reporting its first cases. My sense is that most countries will focus inwards. I don't know the situation in Russia. I am corresponding with good friends of mine in Moscow where they seem to think that cases are low, but people are panicking. That's understandable. China will attempt to exploit this if, in fact, the situation is as positive as they seem to think it is, by noting that this is the Chinese model. We'll be able to expand our Belt and Road, and they will take full political advantage of the opportunities that will be presented. Having said that, so would we. So I think from Russia and China, you will probably see, if they can, exploiting these opportunities both politically and economically. Militarily, I don't think that's the issue. The military issue is what happens if one of these countries, such as Iran, implodes, or what's happening in Iraq or elsewhere. As far as the U.S. military, you have several levels of issues here. First, the defense budget is going to have to be cut. And the way it's going to turn out is we're going to spend more money on procurement of things because that keeps industry going, and less money on what the forces really need in terms of operations, maintenance, and readiness. So the force is going to be, I think, it's going to have to be reduced in size, and it's going to become less ready. We're also going to have to see how we can redeploy people and see if we have to do things differently. I just saw in the news today that 3 sailors aboard USS Theodore Roosevelt, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, have contracted corona.
You read my mind. Now, you were a naval officer. You commanded a ship. What do you do when that problem gets inside your wires?
You're stuck. What you do is it's difficult on board a ship to isolate. I mean, you can do it to some degree, but the berthing arrangements are that you have people sleeping, obviously, within several feet of each other. And so what you have to do is to separate those who appear to have the disease and set up a compartment for people who are running temperatures. And you're going to have to put people in there. The ships will not have enough protective equipment, I'm sure. That would be lasting. And so you're going to have to gamble that, one, your crew is basically healthy because they're young, and people who get it are likely to survive because you have no other options. You can, of course, put into port, and then when you put into port, what do? You can't just be like one of the Carnival cruise liners and evacuate everybody.
Right.
And so you're going to have to look at minimum manning in ships where people are going to keep their distances, and then how do you fumigate those ships to make sure that if there is a virus, it's killed? I mean, these are unbelievably difficult issues.
They are not.
And you have to assume that, in a sense, Bob, this is like a war, and you're going to take casualties.
Well, that's you would have to in the military. Now, I don't understand, as you would, of course, how long ships are at sea during peacetime. But will there be any tendency to keep ships of healthy ships at sea rather than bring them to port?
Yeah, there will. The Seventh Fleet has already done that initially. That they kept people from port calls, and of course you can resupply ships very, very easily by air and of course by supply ships. So you can do that. There is a limit as to how long you can keep people at sea, but the real issue, or I shouldn't say the real issues, the other issues are what do you do with your strategic deterrence force? You've got sailors underway in Trident submarines at sea, under the water for 60 to 90 days or whatever their period is, several months. Then you have missile crews and you've got bomber crews. And so that is a very, very difficult area because you do want to keep some sort of ready force on alert just in the event that some untoward situation happens. So the problems in the military are on the one hand made much more complex by the nature of the duties that these forces are meant to fight. And second, they do have some advantages because most of the people who are young and healthy, so that I would have thought if the infection rate is high, I think that sort of sector of people would be the most likely ones to have minimum symptoms and recover the most likely. So there are pluses and minuses, but it's an exceedingly difficult situation. It's a complex situation just because of the nature of disease and how it spreads.
You know, I was thinking the other day, and I'm sure you know the history of it, you've probably taught it, but the Spanish flu hit at the end of World War I, or at least towards it. What might have been the case had it started 4 years earlier? I can't even. Would there have been a different outcome to the war, or just more deaths?
It depends how bad it was. Given the casualty rates, my guess is they would have kept on fighting. You had an attack in which on a single day 10,000, 20,000 people would be killed or wounded. It would be obviously difficult to keep up the replacement issues if you had an unhealthy population. My best guess is that there probably would have been some kind of truce in place for the time being that would have limited the scope of the war, depending upon the severity of the disease.
Fascinating.
But my best guess is that they would have kept on fighting at lower levels, and in essence, it would have been a de facto stalemate, which in fact, what was happening, with less violence. Because what made the difference is when the Americans entered the war and we had 1 million men in uniform, and that really changed the whole calculus. So it could have been that America might not have entered the war if you had the Spanish flu starting in 1915, 1916, and 600,000 Americans were to die. You could conceivably think that we would not have entered World War I.
Interesting. It is 9:31. Excuse me. Harlan Ullman, national security expert, our guest. Always now these days within the background, with the background being the virus affecting the planet, there still are hotspots, political interest points, and et cetera. Let's start with Israel and the new government that they've asked to be formed. Is a government going to be formed there, and has the prosecution gone on, or is it on hold because of the virus of Netanyahu?
They're trying to form a government. I don't think that they will. And the prosecution so far, it's not clear what's going to happen, whether it will go forward or not. That word on that has not come out, so I can't give you a definitive answer at this stage, Bob. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. Well, let's go then to the thing. We talked a little bit about it last night because it was, I found it of great interest. The piece, a really comprehensive piece in Business Week about the Russians and the Saudis, and now the price of oil going so low that there's an attempt by the Russians particularly to get us out of the fracking business, or at least to hurt it. How has that gone? How will that go, in your opinion?
Given the fact that there's really going to be an economic stoppage, the amount of use of gas and oil obviously is going to be reduced. Certainly just for transportation alone. And so that will just add to the oil glut. And that whole issue of the price of crude, it seems to me, will not be resolved until this virus is resolved. So it will follow. But certainly the markets will continue to be depressed. It's going to hurt even if there were no pricing war between the Saudis and the Russians. Fracking would be hurt because fracking is rather expensive, but there's less demand right now for oil and natural gas, and so that will hurt. But I think that how this unfolds will be secondary to dealing with the coronavirus, at least for the next month or two.
Now, you mentioned Iran earlier. Iraq is become very unstable. I don't know how many cases are there. We still have the issues in Syria, who you've said had their first case. Turkey is, Pakistan and Turkey are having their own issues, and then we'll talk about Afghanistan last. How are these countries, how is the virus going to affect their politics?
It depends. It's obviously on a country-by-country basis. In some countries where they have a better scheme of tracking, they will do better than we will, because you've got to be able to track the disease. You've got to be able to test. As I noted, one of the reasons why the death rate in Germany appears to be low is because they've been able to test and track more people. And so that's essential. We are not particularly good at tracking because we don't have the capacity really to do that. And I am not aware of how well or unwell countries like Turkey or Pakistan or India are in terms of tracing. But obviously, if they have some form of capability, that will be very, very, very helpful. We did not. And so it's got to be looked at on a country-by-country basis. And at this stage, I don't think there are very, very few people who I think have access to that information, simply because it's not one of the things that people would normally be looking at in routine times.
No, but will those wars continue? Will the fight for territory?
Oh, yes, of course.
Pushing back of the Kurds?
Of course. Well, that's going to continue, and I think that you can see some of these small groups using this as an opportunity to promote their own agendas. I mean, you're going to die of jihad. It doesn't make any difference whether you're eviscerated in a bomb or you die of corona. I mean, you can see purposely infecting jihadis and sending them off to fight to infect other people. You know, this is a different type of a personal IED.
Yeah,
it provides explosive. It's a human bomb.
Hey, I know this is a dumb question because I don't know what you know, but I have to ask it, or at least the way I phrase it. I can't ever see the way Iraq has been destabilized until one group or another gets a firm hold on it. And it may be the Sunnis if the Iranians have their way. I mean, the Shias. How will they ever have peace? The only way they ever had reasonable peace was via a strongman.
That's correct. And the answer is that for the foreseeable future, I don't see that Iraq is going to be a stable country. Period.
We should.
And that's going to happen. I mean, you've got the Shia majority, which is largely Iranian. The Shias obviously will try to take control. This will have problems with the Kurds and the Sunnis, but even among the Shias, you have great differences between Shia Iraqis who don't like the Iranians. Iran and Iraq did fight an 8-year war in which millions of people were killed. Don't forget that. And there are still some survivors who are alive. So the situation in Iraq is going to be perilous at best. And how it is going to cope with this particular disease if it becomes rampant will just complicate those issues.
Okay, let's skip over to one of my favorite places, Afghanistan. No one ever wins wars there. No one ever seems to know when to leave. The president's trying to leave, but now I understand that the president, there's a fight over who's really in charge in Afghanistan and who should be negotiating with the Taliban. How do we resolve this, and how do we really get the hell out of there?
If I had the answer to that question, Bob. Look, you've got President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah both claiming that they are the president. So you have chaos inside Kabul. You have increasing attacks by the Taliban. You saw that a post was overrun the other day, and the Afghan security forces were killed. So you have a government which is in chaos. The government has not been empowered to negotiate with the Taliban. The Americans are negotiating with the Taliban, but that doesn't have the complete deal. And so what you're going to see, I think, in Afghanistan is continued chaos for the foreseeable future. And the Americans have cut off some sort of aid. I think that we will continue to reduce our troops. That, I think, will be on hold right now because of the coronavirus. I'm not sure. But at some stage, we're going to reduce our troops to a minimum where they will be providing advice and assist, basically for counterinsurgency. But it's going to be up to the Afghans to work it out. And my sense is that there will be some kind of a ceasefire between Kabul and parts of the country and the Taliban, where the Taliban will have control of their own sectors, their own regions, and Afghanistan will remain a very, very fragmented country.
One would suspect forever. One of the things that jumped off the page at me the other day, it's unusual, particularly in this time of a pandemic, that Pompeo himself was sent to Afghanistan, and they already took $1 billion off the table in aid, and they're threatening to take another. I didn't know we spent that. I know we spent trillions of the war there, but now we're still giving them a lot of money. They're already taking $1 billion off the table, and they threatened to take another off the table. That ought to be sufficient, one would think, compulsion for them to behave. No?
Well, it's very difficult, and I don't have a good answer for you.
Wow. Okay. Well, you certainly know what's going on in that part of the world as best as anyone does. So that I think that answer and the way you answered it answers the question about as well as it can be. Afghanistan is just a very odd duck. I don't know how to put it any other way. Because based on things you've said on this program, I go and do some homework and I find no one's ever won a war there. No, ever.
That's correct.
Ever.
Remember, Alexander had to marry one of the headman's daughters to be able to extricate himself.
Just to get out of Dodge. Yeah, I find that fascinating.
It's unbelievable what happens, and this is obviously part of my book, Anatomy of Failure, Why America Loses Every War It Starts, is that administrations, Republican or Democrat, doesn't make any difference, are so arrogant that they completely disregard history and say it does not apply to me. We did that in Vietnam. I mean, did we not realize that the Vietnamese were fighting the Chinese for centuries? Did we not realize that the French got thrown out? This is absurd. And so we should have learned that lesson in Afghanistan. My argument is that we should have let Jim Mattis, who was then a brigade commander, go after bin Laden instead of the 10th Mountain Division. If bin Laden had been killed or captured, we wouldn't be in Afghanistan. But, it's like saying, gee, we should have started worrying about the coronavirus a year ago.
Well, yeah, it's those ships, if you will, have sailed Harlan Ullman. If I may, we're going to take this full circle and come back to domestic politics and the coronavirus's effect on that in a moment. But I often think of the Jim Mattises and the Colin Powells and et cetera, and these other men and women who are now at home and got thrown out of the administration. What do you think they think about these days? What do they worry about? Or do you think they just say, I'm done, I'm just going to go to the beach? Well, now they can't even do that. But
I would hesitate to argue what I think Jim Mattis thinks, but I think it's clear to any sensible person that Jim must be just distraught at what's happening.
I should think so.
People I know who were in the administration, they are not happy, and it's just going to get worse. This is very interesting, Bob. My column went up today with UPI.
Yes.
And I'm going to read the feedback from my editor.
Go ahead.
I have just gotten some feedback already from people saying that my column, by the way, was the coronavirus, which is a different form of Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And we're talking about the notion is if Pearl Harbor started a war, et cetera, we have to see the differences and the similarities. And in that column, I argued, as in war we have medals, we need to have medals for people who are on the front lines, but in very mundane positions, from Uber drivers who are delivering groceries, obviously, to medical people. Anyway, with that background, I've gotten some feedback from people saying they aren't comfortable with the comparison to Pearl Harbor at a time when Asians are being racially attacked by people blaming them for the coronavirus.
What does
Can
that
you
have
believe that?
No, but that's a stretch that goes from here to kingdom come. I can't believe.
Well, this is like Liberty University.
Yeah, same thing. It's
people will draw whatever they want, no matter what you say and mean. It will be reviewed as something entirely different. And the notion here had nothing to do with the fact that the Japanese were Asian. The fact was that here's what happened Pearl Harbor. Here's what we did in the wake of Pearl Harbor in terms of planning. Now we're declaring it's another war, and people are saying that this is racist. This is the problem.
I remember once I ran into something like that. We were talking about some of it was during the phase of, and rightly so, of people dealing with rapes and such on college campuses. And I had said, it was totally taken out of context. I had said, well, and there are those cases where you could run into the wrong type of woman that maybe just wants to use it to, get even with someone. And I got a whole bunch of emails, and some people I really liked and respected saying, what do you mean? What is a wrong type of woman? And I said, what do you mean by the question? What I meant was someone with ill intent. That's all. I wasn't framing it as in there's a certain type of woman. It was a contextual. Well, welcome. Well, you've already been through this in your whole career. Welcome to the club. Let's take it full cycle. Speaking of liberty and Green New Deals and politics and Schumer and et cetera, politically, what is this going to do to the presidency of Donald Trump? And how does he manage to hang on to such strong support, even these days, whether you like Trump or not? Every time he opens his mouth, he makes half a fool of himself.
This will cause reaction among your listeners.
Why not?
Lincoln said you can only fool some of the people some of the time. Trump is fooling most of the people all the time. And I think that the fact that he's having these television briefings, which are really pep rallies, gives the impression that we're really doing something. And they spin them in a very, very positive way, make no mistake about that. And so I believe that gives comfort. And what will happen, it seems to me, Bob, is that as this disease unfolds, and if it gets to be as bad as the experts believe, that will destroy President Trump's credibility. He can only yell wolf so many times. But at this stage, a majority of people seem to be, if polls are believable, satisfied with what the government is doing. And so as long as they can have press conferences and make the point and come up with sort of positive notes, which is fine, then I think that the president will be seen as doing well. as I've written before, it strikes me that this is very much akin to the 5 o'clock follies in Saigon during the Vietnam War, when the press were being briefed with what they knew was absolute nonsense. And I'm afraid that these press conferences are going to turn into a 5 o'clock folly, especially if the disease continues to unfold at a rapid rate as happening in New York. So what will happen in November? Who knows? I mean, one of the challenges we likely are going to face, will Congress allow proxy voting or voting for people who are not physically present? Remember that the Congress was shut down physically because of the anthrax scare. What do you do now? You've already got 5 or 6 members who are self-isolating. So that is going to be a huge issue. Continuity of government becomes important. So that's a fundamental issue. What do you do about the conventions? Suppose there is no convention in Milwaukee. Does Bernie Sanders file a claim, and now this goes to the courts, and the Democrats don't really have a contender? I mean, there are all sorts of things of which Hollywood is made in movies. That could be these uncertainties and these contingencies that come out of fiction, but now fiction has become potentially real given the extent and scope of this particular disease.
Do you think?
So at this stage, it's really impossible to tell what's going to happen in November.
Doesn't it also tell us that there are some old rules that don't apply anymore? For example, John McCain practically had to get out of a deathbed to come and vote on Obamacare and preserving it. We have senators who are isolating themselves. I don't understand why they can't vote in absentia. I really, it boggles the mind in this day and age. It's like we're acting like we're still in horse and buggy days.
I agree with you. And I'm sure Mitch McConnell has his reasons. I don't know what they are, but I would not dismiss them. The traditions of the Senate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There may be Senate rules that have to be changed. Can they get a vote? Is it going to require a 60 vote to do that? And they may not get 60 votes. Who knows? So, but it's an issue that may become a very, very serious issue. But at this stage, it's impossible to know. If the disease unfolds as the experts believe, then I think Donald Trump will not be electable. If it's something in between, who knows? And obviously, if it dissipates rapidly, then I think he will tout that as a great success. So you tell me how this disease unfolds, and I'll give you my idea who's going to be president.
It's kind of interesting that it should all fall on how this disease is managed. Now, there's a parallel here. The national press or the broadcasting community has actually started sharing Governor Cuomo's speeches. Again, New York being the hot spot, but he, by contrast, is so much more in control. And believe me, I get calls every day on and off air, people that didn't like the governor praising his behavior. So these are real opportunities for him, whether or not he's intentionally doing it. He's so much more clear about what he wants to do. What do you make of that? And is it going to make him a national figure again, which he has not been?
Well, I think Cuomo will. I think that Gavin Newsom of California will. And I think, Mike DeWine may be a little bit old, even though he's only 72. But some of these governors are going to emerge to the fore because they're handling it in very, very sensible ways. And, of course, the White House understands that, and that's why they're already criticizing Cuomo for not buying 15,000 respirators 10 years ago or whenever it was. Can you imagine going to the New York Assembly in 2015 saying, I need $35 million to buy 15,000 respirators? What they would say? Of course they wouldn't approve it.
They'd have left him out of the State House.
Of course. So, there are criticisms and there are criticisms. But there are going to be, let me put it this way. If there had not been a coronavirus, I think Joe Biden would have won. I think Americans are just tired of Donald Trump. The coronavirus is going to change everything dramatically. And the reason it is because how this unfolds can destroy Donald Trump. He can go down as the worst president in history, or it can make him a hero. And the event is so powerful that it has that impact. Now, having said that, and there's always a caveat, or many caveats, Bob. In 1991, George H.W. Bush had a 95% popularity.
Absolutely.
And, of course, he lost a year later. My sense is that that's not going to happen at this stage simply because November is too close, and the treatise or the results of the coronavirus on the economy will still be playing out, and so therefore there will not be a huge gap in time. But that is the wild, wild card. And as I said, if the disease does not get better, I think Biden will win.
You know, you've given the opportunity to me to ask you a fun question while we have a few minutes left. Harlan Ullman, internationally renowned national security expert. You know his most recent book, Anatomy of Failure, How America Loses the War as It Starts. He's working on another one. His UPI column is out, and we'll remind you of that before we go. But I've always found fascinating, how do we rate who the best and worst presidents are? For me, the worst president of my lifetime, even though he was a very likable man, was George Bush, too, because I think he took the job like some people accept a promotion and have no idea what they're doing. Carter was over-controlling. But before you even answer that, I had coined this phrase back when I was running a management training school on Wall Street. Some executives are incapably capable, which is to say that they are proactively incompetent. They make things worse. They think
Sure.
Who were our real bad presidents? And maybe there was someone who got a lot done, but was all terrible. I mean, how does someone like you, who lives in that world, who works with these people, what's a bad president?
Well, you have to rate every president according to his time in office.
His times and his sure.
And it's going to be divided judgment. I think that despite his charisma, Jack Kennedy was a bad president because he wasn't ready for office, but it was an incomplete time. Lyndon Johnson could have been a brilliant president, but he was destroyed by Vietnam. Jimmy Carter or Richard Nixon could have been a great president in some ways, but was destroyed by Watergate. I think Johnson or Nixon could have been great presidents, but they had, unfortunately, these crises. Jimmy Carter, I think, was a very weak president because things did not get better under his watch. I think Ronald Reagan was hugely overrated, even though Reagan had an extraordinary ability to communicate. And here's where I divide from a lot of my Republican friends. I just think that he was hugely overrated, was served by particularly good people, and was fortunate enough that his mistakes were really not seen as mistakes, but were seen in terms of his whole Strategic Defense Initiative, which was credited for bankrupting Russia. That's nonsense. That was never the case. I think the best president of my lifetime has been George H.W. Bush, and he never got a second term. And my comment for every president since H.W. Bush, they all have lacked the judgment, the experience to be president. Their characters were, in some cases, useful. In Bill Clinton's case, he had a flawed character, and it obviously showed in the Monica Lewinsky business. But they were just not ready for the job. I do think that you have to view George W. Bush in terms of his first and then this couple of his last years as president. I think for the first 5 or 6 years as president, he was a disaster. But to his credit, he learned. And quite frankly, if Bush, despite the horrors of Afghanistan and Iraq, if Bush had run for a third term, I probably would have voted for him because I think he learned his lesson. But
that's
the cost of tuition were just too great. Obama was flawed because Obama was intellectually arrogant and also lacked the experience and, in some cases, judgment. And now we have, in my mind, the worst president in our history because he's flawed in terms of character, in terms of judgment, in terms of experience. Yet it's amazing that his popularity has remained as high, and he is even more politically divisive than Barack Obama.
How do I say this? You know why? See, it's hard. I'm going to assume that you had, I mean, based on you went to officer school and everything, you had a good upbringing, and you may not have had, or perhaps, a lot of exposure to working class people or what I like to call a locker room mentality.
Oh, well, I was in the Navy.
No, okay.
There's no better locker room than that.
Well, then you understand, because this president is very popular with blue collar people, and I don't mean this in any way to be nasty to people, but with the tattoo wearing, beer drinking, pickup truck crowd, and he's always going to be, and that whole notion of we're better than everybody else. And he resonates with people. His insulting people resonates with people. His name calling resonates with people. His lack of intellectual curiosity resonates with people. And that's the bottom line. And
I think I agree with that. Anthony Scaramucci's book on Trump was called Blue Collar President. And Anthony got it absolutely right that even though Trump has a lot of money and came from a lot of money. He probably got more money if you if you discount it up to the future than he actually has. He probably lost money, but that's neither here nor there. He's blue collar in the way he looks, the way he acts. The fact that he's got a lot of money doesn't make any difference. And you've got a huge number of Americans who are just fed up with government. I've got really bright friends who are Democrats.
I know.
Who are strongly Trump because they believe that Washington is so flawed that it's got to be cleaned out, and that's the issue, and they will tolerate anything.
That's
and I think that's the strength behind Donald Trump.
But can't there be more effective people to change things rather than a guy who belongs at the end of a bar drinking a beer and screaming expletives?
All I can say is that every president since H.W. Bush has been very lacking in that capacity. And Donald Trump has become the logical extension of that. And I'm not sure that Joe Biden is going to be able to change it if he wins.
See, because I understand Donald Trump because of where and how I grew up from the standpoint of, I know a lot of hardworking men, and they're Trump supporters, hardworking men and women who built businesses, who support their families, who wouldn't think of missing work if they had cholera. Who know, and I'm not talking about the safety net that we know we need and that we know that there's been racism and everything else, but that the far left does things to buy votes that kill them, whether it's grants that wound up being spent more on the people running things than their grants to people that don't deserve them, other benefits that are given out that are just to get votes. They see this, it drives them crazy, and they vote for Trump, and I understand it.
One of the problems is that if you take a look at the Republican Party, certainly the Republican Party in Congress, it would seem that Democratic women, at least a number of Democratic women who present themselves as being radical, the so-called, what do they call themselves, the quartet, or?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, there's we got names for them. Westchester. We have the collective. We have the indivisible Westchester.
They have become more visible than the equivalent Republicans on the right.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who are just turned off by that. Yep. And they're also turned off by the agenda that these people propose because it is so radical.
Yep.
Health care, big issue. Nobody wants Medicare for all. Bang. And so if you're blue collar or you're a hardworking person, you see some of these people, even though Sanders does attract a certain calling, and you're really put off by the Democrats in large measures because you can argue that they had 8 years of Barack Obama and things did not get better. So there are a lot of political issues here, and that American politics has become so politicized and polarized. This is probably as polarized as it's been since the Civil War, even though, as I noted, during the Depression, 40%, 35% of the American public hated Franklin Roosevelt. But polarization today is a huge issue. And unfortunately, we're allowing the coronavirus to become polarized because either you listen to Donald Trump, and that means you're probably a Republican, and if you listen to the physicians and the medical experts, you're probably a Democrat, and that's wrong.
No, it's totally wrong. There's a guy, and I always use him, kind of like my benchmark. Whenever I tell him this, that he's the guy I'm mentioning on the air, I don't think he believes me. I think he's blowing smoke at him, but it's true. I know him for about 25 years now. And I remember when he started out, and he built a construction business down in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And he has to hire people, and he's up on scaffolds and building houses and trying to make money and taking jobs and struggling. And I keep imagining after he collects his money and pays his team and feeds his family, when he pays his taxes and he sees the way government spends money and wastes his tax money and does the kinds of favors on the far left that seem excessive, I always use him. He must go nuts. And not
Absolutely.
that I go nuts when I pay too much on taxes, but there's just something about the vision of using him as an example of a guy. I mean, it's not, sometimes those of us who've worked for big corporations, you get that check and it's always there. But a guy that's living day to day on his wits and his work, it's got to be infuriating.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And that's why I argue that the biggest crisis facing this country is the failure of government to govern.
Yep. I think that's a good way to end with one more caveat. Tell us about your column today. Don't give it all away. We want people to read it in UPI.
Well, it compares Pearl Harbor, which started World War II, with the coronavirus, which has now been declared a war. And I'm concerned about calling anything a war. We've had a war on drugs, a war on poverty, a war on crime, a war on virtually everything, on terrorism, that didn't work out. There are some similarities, there are some differences. One of the similarities, which also has a difference, is that in war, people are brave. They risk their lives. But they risk their lives against an enemy in which their chance of being killed in combat is very, very real.
Mm-hmm.
Today, people are risking their lives against an invisible enemy, and you are completely uncertain as to where that enemy could come from. And so it's going to require a greater form of courage, intellectual as well as physical courage, and it's going to apply not to soldiers and Marines and airmen and sailors, but as I said, to taxi drivers, to medical specialists, to people who are picking up the garbage, people who are doing mundane things,
EMT,
who are going to risk their lives just to carry out the basic functions on which society must function. It's going to require a great deal of heroism, and we have got to respect that. Second, we need to have a comprehensive plan at home, and we need to have a global plan. We need to have a plan globally. And at this stage, I don't think we have either.
Well, Harlan Ullman, thank you once again. You stay safe, be well, stay quarantined, and write more columns. And your new book, you got a title yet?
It's called Westphalia II, meaning the change from the old Westphalian system that was in place for 400 years. Westphalia II, a world we think we understand and yet do not.
I can't wait for it. Harlan Ullman, thank you very much. Be well. Harlan Ullman, everybody. It doesn't get much better than that. It's like vitamins for your brain listening to him. It is 10:02. We have people to thank, places to go. What was I going to say? People to see. But no, we can't see people here. You've been listening to Mornings with Bob Marrone. We just finished our long-form segment. We will be back tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow's very special treat is going to be Andy Spano. See how he evaluates all of this. This is Radio Westchester, Mornings with Bob Marrone. I am he. This is your radio station, a very quiet train station, and we have guests to thank, and I shall do that now. Guests and callers. Also, I want to thank people. A lot of texts and notes wishing me a happy birthday. It's one of the birthdays I wouldn't like to forget, but thank you nonetheless. We also need to thank Vince Russo and Anthony, Tom, Ivar Hayden, A.J. Woodson, of course, Harlan Ullman, and Sean Patterson Howard, the mayor of Mount Vernon. And we need to thank our sponsors, of course, the United Hebrew of New Rochelle, the top-rated campus of senior care. Visit uhgc.org. Aging Issues Management, the law firm of Payne & Kahn, Dominic's Fine Cigars, and a plug-in virtual reality, and our friends at the Beachmont Tavern. I'm dreaming about one of their burgers now. And I want to shout out, I don't know if he's listening, to my grandson, who is doing a very heroic and wonderful thing for his father today, and to his father, wishing them the best. I love you, Ian, and I'm so very proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. And to the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow.